let's order at 5:33. You ready to go, Karen?
I am.
Okay, so adjustments to the agenda.
Yes, I need to add under select board items, C2, it'll be 6, draft budgets.
Okay.
And I may adjust as we go because we have Geordie here. So I may move him in front of draft warnings.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so next would be approval of minutes for the January 12th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of January 12th, 2022.
And I'll second that.
Okay, been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of January 12th, 2022. Is there any discussion, any questions?
No.
Nope.
All set. Okay, and all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Next, the warrants to the treasurer.
We can take that off too. I'm sorry, Josh, I didn't. We
Okay.
don't have warrants this week. This is a special meeting.
Oh, okay, sorry, yeah.
My mistake.
Nope.
That's what happens.
Public comment on items not on the agenda. Again, because I have a sort of technical glitch, I can't see others, Karen. So if there are people on, maybe you can call them, or I know
Sure.
if you're on.
Look at it with you.
So I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. Sounds good. Okay, and you don't have any public in person, is that correct?
No.
Nobody in the office. Okay, good. So town managers report.
I'm gonna defer that till next week to our regular meeting.
Good. Okay, so select board items for discussion and action. Windham Sheriff's Department budget contract FY 2023.
Yeah.
Mark,
Sheriff Anderson was supposed to be here and I don't see he is here.
okay, so why don't we table that discussion until if he shows up, we can take it out?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. So State of Vermont 2021 Equalization Study Results. Geordie Heller.
Am I presenting them, or how do you want that to go?
Yeah, if you, I mean, if you want to give us a little bit of an overview of sort of what it means, what the implications are, that would be great.
Sure. So every year, the state tracks our what they call valid sales, which are home and property sales that are at an arm's length transaction with a willing and knowledgeable buyer and willing and knowledgeable seller. And they track those as compared to our assessed value. And then they do a running 3-year average, which gives our common level of appraisal. And if the common level of appraisal, or CLA, and our town assessments get enough out of whack, they require us to do a new townwide reappraisal. With the COVID bump in sales values, our CLA is dropping. It had been dropping slightly every year, and this year it dropped from 97 to 93.84. If we get to 85, they require a new townwide reappraisal. So we're okay for another year or so. The Board of Listers has talked about it quite a bit and thought that after town meeting, when the select board has less on their plate, we would talk to you then more about our thoughts. Because you have plenty to do between now and town meeting. And this is not something that would be happening in the next, not for a few years, but we should plan towards it. And there's also a coefficient of dispersion, which is a little complicated mathematically, but what it is you take the median, median assessment ratio of sale to assessed value, take the median and then see what the spread from that is. And if that gets to 20%, the state also mandates a townwide reappraisal, and we're currently at 12.5, so we're okay there as well. And Eileen probably understands it, but the rest of you may not. Are there questions?
Oh, so many.
Go ahead.
So I just wanted to mention that it sounds like ours dropped about 4%. That's much better than Brattleboro's. That one dropped 7%. And if that trend continues, we'll definitely be below 85 this year. So this is good news.
Yeah.
So does the trend look like it's continuing at the same rate, or have things leveled off? We talked about this a little bit the other day, Geordie.
Yeah, it seems in 2020, when sales opened up sort of at the end of the summer, things were dramatically, well, they rose really, really quickly to where if a house was 30% over our assessed value, we thought that was pretty close. Many of them are 50 to 80%. We haven't had any that were double our assessed value, but we've had some that were 98% above. This year was pretty similar. I'm not an expert on home sales, but I would guess that have leveled off and that we should drop back a little bit, not to where we were. But we're in year 2 of the elevated sales. So another year we'll lose our solid reference point. So I would think next year we may have a more severe drop even.
Josh, can you see hands?
Yes. Yep. So John Katz has a question.
Okay,
There he is.
there it is.
Hi, it was just Jonathan, you had asked us to come, but I see that that's further down under town meeting preparation. And I just didn't see us listed on the agenda. So I wanted to make sure that was clarified as one of the articles.
It is an article, and when we get to the draft articles, we will have you speak on
Great,
the article.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
first, my compliments to Mr. Heller. I have never heard a clearer explanation of the common level of appraisal. And also a question for Mr. Heller. Would you happen to know regarding the increased sales prices of houses in Putney, the proportion that were sold to out-of-state as opposed to in-state buyers?
I don't know, and sometimes we don't know because if they put their, if they're deciding to move, the address we have is a Putney address. So I know some have come from Brattleboro, and some have come from Texas and everywhere in between. So I don't have that information easily accessible.
So in thinking about preparing for, well, you said we'd talk about this later when town meeting's over, but so, in layman's terms, the common level of appraisal indicates the percentage of what houses on our grand list, the value. So houses on the grand list are currently appraised at roughly 94% of what they would be appraised at if we were to do a reappraisal. Is that correct?
Yeah, and
3-year average.
we would call it, 93% of fair market value.
Right. Okay.
Which is what we're doing. In theory, the day they complete the townwide reassessment, everything is assessed at fair market, 100% of fair market value for one day.
Yeah.
And then it's.
And so if we were to, if we were to continue at the current rate we are, how precipitously would that percentage drop as we got into, as you commented, we'll be in the third year of sort of the anomaly years, or maybe not, that maybe the new norm, we don't know. I mean, if we have another year like the last 2 years, what's our CLA going to look like? Any idea?
No, because I don't really know, because they had calculated at the state, but it could be in the low 80s, I would think, because we will have lost our, there weren't a lot of sales in 2020. 2019, our CLA was 99 or something. So it was pretty close to good. But if we lose that one and all of a sudden we have 3 years that everything is 25, 30, 35%, they do throw out the ones that are really, really high, the really exceptional outliers. But yeah, it could turn into a mandate.
And at that point, we have 3 years to complete a study. Is that correct?
I don't know the answer to that. I know when I asked one of the appraiser company guys earlier in the year, he said they were scheduling 3 years out.
Right.
Wow.
So I think if you're working on it, the state can't
Do much.
too badly, but
yeah. So what, if anything, can or should you do, or I mean, I'm saying you, but I really mean that as all of us do to balance? I mean, can you increase the grand list sort of arbitrarily or only or not?
We could do with a statistical reappraisal, which would entail figuring out what types of properties we would need to reappraise. In 2024, I'm getting a little bit into what I was going to wait for till after town meeting, but in 2024 will be 10 years out, which is typically when the state is recommending we do one anyway.
Yeah.
So that's what the Board of Listers has been talking about, how to best way to move forward.
Okay, that's good. Good. Okay. Any other questions or comments? All right. I can't see a screen, so anybody on screen? Karen, we're good.
We are good at the moment.
Okay, good. Thank you, Geordie. I see you're up again in a few minutes, so stick around.
Okay.
Town meeting preparation, legislative bill, Senate and House for town meeting remote and remote open meetings.
John Johnson is going to prep us on this.
Sounds good.
Okay. Mike and Jeanette's committees in the House and Senate worked very hard at the opening of their session to make things a little easier for towns. Let me first say that we have 5 open seats. There's a select board seat, the moderator, there's 2 lister positions and a cemetery commissioner. Those will all be voted by Australian ballot as we've done in the past. the new stuff is Senate Bill 172. And that allows select boards to have town meeting essentially like we did last year. A virtual, remote, informational meeting and all issues decided by Australian ballot on March 1. There's also authority to move it to a different date. Westminster and Vernon last year both moved theirs to May, I think, and held a floor vote outside under a tent. So that's an option. The other significant change that came down just a few hours ago today was petition signatures for candidates for office are no longer required. The only thing to be required to be placed on the ballot is to file a consent form with me. I have those forms if anybody wants one, or they're also available on the Secretary of State's website. It's a fillable PDF. And if you don't have access to a printer, you can fill it out and email it to me. The deadline for candidates is 5 p.m. on Monday, January 24th. The deadline for articles was last week. We have 3 articles. And then we have a bunch of pretty rigid timelines coming up if we're going to keep the March 1 town meeting. The warning needs to be filed on January 30th. And then early voting would start on February 9th. Karen, what am I missing?
So the public informational meeting will have to be held, is it 10 days prior to March 1st?
It needs to be held within 10 days of March 1st.
Right.
And so we would have to schedule that and publicize it. And then, so what I need the select board to decide either today or at next week's meeting is whether you're going to move town meeting, whether you're going to go virtual, whether we're going to mail ballots to all active voters like we did last year. But mailing ballots to all active voters is a lot of work for my office, but we're happy to do it. And I think it really increased voter participation.
Mhm.
So in general, I'm not opposed to that. And that was something that was authorized in a bill that passed last session, giving the select board's authority for all local elections, asking the clerk to mail ballots to all active voters. The other things we resolved, the other changes to election law from last year, we resolved in an August V.S.A meeting. That includes that when you vote in person for town meeting, if you vote in person in my office, you will be able to deposit your ballot in the tabulator. We approved the continuing use of the secure drop box located on the front steps of Town Hall. And we provided the maximum amount of time to use that box up until the counting of the ballots on town meeting day. Any questions on anything?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I would like to ask the town clerk a question. If we move the town meeting date into the future, do the deadlines that you mentioned also move?
Yes, they do. So if we hold let's say we do it sometime in May, candidate petition or candidate consents would be due the 6th Monday before the date of the meeting. The law does provide that all citizen petition and candidate petitions that are already in would be valid for whatever date we move. So that we have 3 citizen petitions this year. They're not going to have to go out and get additional signatures. It would provide an opportunity if there was another citizen petition, there would be a new deadline. And those dates are all set by statute, 47 days before the election or the 6th Monday before the election, so all of those dates would move.
Are you able to reveal the petition? I'm just wanting to basically put a plug in for people who are looking to do something additional around town. You mentioned 5 open seats, but only 3 petitions. Can you?
No, two different questions. So I've submitted a petition and consent to run for re-election as a cemetery commissioner. Geordie and Susan have both submitted petitions and consents for a 3-year and a 2-year lister position. Meg Mott has submitted a petition to be re-elected as moderator, and I've received a select board petition and consent from Timothy Morris. So that's where we are there. And then there's the 3 citizen articles are the fair and impartial policing, expand the select board, and allowing the retail sale of cannabis in Putney.
Right. Good. Thank you for clarifying that.
Question?
Yeah, I can't see who that is, but go ahead.
It's Eileen. So what was my question? Is there a way for us to split it up? Like have some of it be Australian ballot and some of it be town meeting?
Well, that's the way we've traditionally done it. Even at town meeting when we were, in the before times when we were meeting in person, the elected positions, select board, lister, moderator, those were decided by Australian ballot, as were citizen initiatives like the fair and impartial policing. We voted, not to allow nuclear waste from Vermont Yankee to come through Putney. There have been all kinds of different citizen articles. So if we had an in-person meeting, say in May, we would still have an Australian ballot.
Right, but I'm wondering if there's a way to split it up so that elected officials, so that we wouldn't have to split up the elected officials piece. It's a little problematic to have people serve past their term.
Senate Bill 172 specifically says that if you move your meeting, the terms of all elected officials continue until that meeting.
Right.
Okay.
So
Right.
Mr. Babbitt would be on the hook for another couple months if we go to May. As would the current listers, as would the cemetery commissioner, as would the moderator. We're going to have a school vote on March 1 anyway.
Mhm.
So just in terms of having either 1 or 2 elections at different times, that increases the cost to the town. It's not huge money, because we still have the printing costs and the programming the tabulator. Those costs don't change. What you would spend more money on election officials, the poll watchers, the check-in and check-out table. That expense would double, but it's less than $1,000.
I suspect we get more participation in the school budget vote if we had them both at the same time.
I would think that would be true as well.
Okay.
But again, the things that we need to decide is, are we going to do it like last year? Are we going to do it some other way? And then are we going to mail ballots to all active voters like we did last year? So those are the 2 questions that we need to answer. And the drop dead date is certainly your next, it can't be decided after your next meeting on the 26th. Just because the deadline, if we decide to stay with March 1, the deadlines are that weekend. The first deadline to post the warning, and we would need to get the ballots to the printer so that early voting could start on February 9th as required.
So I have a question, John. Sorry, Josh.
Go ahead, Karen. Yeah.
So if we postpone to a later date, I lost my train of thought now. Yeah, never mind.
I can jump in and we can
Yeah.
circle, Karen.
Turn me off, Josh.
I'm wondering whether you have an impression based on what you know from other town clerks' experience last year, et cetera. And I know this would be you, if you're willing at least to offer a personal opinion. Do you think something worked better than other things for towns last year, or not necessarily?
You know, yesterday I had a long chat with Meg Mott about how things went last year. And I thought it went really well. I mean, if you look at the list of people who participated in the virtual town meeting, you know, there were a really big number of people. And if you recall, that virtual town meeting was held on a morning where we had, you know, 3 or 4 inches of snow.
Right.
So if that had been an in-person meeting, I think attendance would have been less. I've also talked to Fletcher Proctor, who was the moderator for Westminster. They did an outdoor meeting. He thought it went really well. Tim and Vernon, they did an outdoor meeting under a tent also. He thought it went really well and that it worked for them. You know, it's tough because, you know, town meeting historically has been a time when everybody comes together. You know, you meet and decide, and then you have some nice lunch, and then, you know, you continue the meeting after lunch. We have tentative approval to use the school gym on March 1, although that approval came before Omicron, and I haven't asked her for an update just because I wasn't sure how we were going to go forward. If we did do an outdoor one, I would think, you know, the softball field on Sand Hill Road might be a good place. You know, rent a tent. I have no idea what that costs. But that would be an opportunity for everyone to get together. You know, get the Stockwell Brothers band to play, and you know, it would be, that could be super fun. You know, we used to have a town party. And so maybe you could have a town meeting and town party on the same day, which would hopefully unify the town more than something else. But again, I don't have a strong opinion either way. I think everything went really well last year. I think the informational meeting was productive and people were engaged and asking good questions. I think Meg Mott did an excellent job in, you know, fielding questions and managing the meeting. And so I think that's a nice way to do it. And I say that even though I had to give up a Saturday of skiing to sit at my computer for 8 hours. So that's a really viable format, I think. I'm done. Karen.
All right, so I was just looking at the calendar. So there's 28 days in February. And if I count 10 days back, Jonathan and Josh, it's going to be February 19th. I don't even know if town reports are going to be back in time to get them out in the mail for people to even look at. And then the 26th, I have reserved at the library for, you know, a public informational meeting. But is that enough time for people to review the materials and make an educated decision about budgets and articles? And because right now we're looking at, I have 14 articles on a draft warning for town meeting. So that's a tight schedule to get town reports out to all the voters.
Although not different than a usual year, and I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just, you know, that's how we usually do it. But that doesn't mean it's a good thing.
Right.
I guess the question for David and Eileen from me is, you know, do we want to try and make this decision tonight? Do we want to think of a week and go from there? I mean, I have mixed feelings. You know, my sense is that Omicron, I don't know whether it's peaked in Vermont, but is likely, if it hasn't, it's likely to peak relatively soon from the looks of most of the data that's out there. is March 1st a realistic time for us to think about having an in-person meeting? I don't know, but I also don't know that May 1st or May, whatever it would be, is any more realistic for a variety, whether there's going to be another variant or whether Omicron's going to do a double peak or, who knows? So I don't know. I mean, I would tend to want to stay with our usual schedule, but if that's creates undue burden, then I don't want to do that. David or Eileen, you got feedback?
Go ahead.
How much leeway do we have for, well, so first of all, I'm struggling with this because I'm really would like to have an in-town meeting. But I also know that for myself, I've become relatively uncomfortable in large crowds. So I'm worried that if we did try to have something in March, we'd have extremely low turnout, which would be unfortunate. So, but I also hear that we have a bit of a time crunch in order to get it, maybe to make it a virtual public informational session by March 1st. And I don't know what's going to happen in May, and I feel like it's possible that we'll be in the same boat. It'll rain that day, something will happen. Yeah, I don't have a good feeling about moving it just so that we can have an in-person meeting. So I'm wondering if there's any leeway to move the voting portion so that we would have enough time to do a public informational session. Or is it all or nothing?
Let's do it like it was last year and then have a big party later. Yeah, why not?
Yay, Eva.
John, is there any reason if we were to do an in-person meeting in March, which I agree with Eileen, I don't have any reason to believe that would be necessarily a wise idea. But if we were to do that, is there any reason we couldn't have a virtual component included in a in-person meeting?
The problem is verifying who's a registered voter. When we do a floor meeting, we have a separate check-in table, and you have to pass the check-in table to sit in the town portion, and then there's a visitors portion. And I don't know how you do that on a virtual meeting. Eva's here. I know that she's a registered voter, but some people I don't know.
So how did we manage that for the well, maybe it didn't, maybe there wasn't a component for the informational meeting last year. So maybe it didn't.
Right. In the informational meeting, we kept track of everybody who was there. Alyssa maintained a list, but we weren't voting on anything. It was just a discussion.
Right. Yeah.
And most of the people who were there, I knew, looking at the people that are at this meeting, I think I know everyone except maybe one. So I know Howard Fairman's a registered voter in Putney. But if you have 300 people, you just can't do that. I just can't do that, and wouldn't feel comfortable that we didn't have, hackers in or whatnot. I just don't think that's a secure way to have a vote. Can we have a discussion? Yes. We've always had visitors at town meeting. The guy from Sebeds, they've always come and do their pitch as the town tries to cut their budget, in the open session. And that's, I think that's healthy. I think that's good for the community. It's killing me that we don't have in-person meetings. But I'm with Eileen. I'm really not comfortable in large groups of people indoors.
Yeah.
If I could say something, I agree with that. I think that it's important that we mail out, Australian ballots to all registered voters. I think the participation was up enough last year that really matters. And I can't believe that this is going to go away to the point where enough people are going to feel comfortable meeting in person. And it would be, as much as I would love to have an in-person meeting, that would be great. I think it is important that we meet together when we can. I don't think this is the time for it. And I don't know if it's realistic, Karen, to do it on that day. I'm not sure if you're saying this is more difficult this year for some reason than other years, or it's not possible. I'm not sure which you're saying. If you're saying it's not possible, then we need to pick another day. And I need to pick another mask. Hang on.
It's gonna be a tight schedule. And I can't guarantee that, you know, town reports are gonna go to the printer on time and then come back, you know. We'd like to have town reports in before February 14th. Probably this year it'll be February 11th. You know, we got to put labels on them. We got to get them out in the mail. And we all know how the US Postal Service is struggling right now too. So there's no guarantee.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
first, a suggestion. I'm looking at the participant list here, and other than people who are here in official capacities, there are 8 private citizens present. So my suggestion is that while we're having a valuable, while particularly you folks are having a valuable discussion this evening, that you actually put the same question on your next regular meeting agenda, which will be 48 hours warning, and more people will be able to contribute. Because it certainly is true that you know, I quite agree. I'm also not comfortable about being in an indoor group. In fact, I do not go into any such group. This having, among other things, to do with being older, although thrice vaccinated. Now, I understand that although the town clerk mentioned doing something else, I understand we actually have 2 alternatives. The other one being to have a meeting later when we could have it outdoors. And this is simply not to necessarily speak in favor of it, but in terms of producing a town meeting at Cooper's Field, Next Stage Arts can certainly show us how that's done, because they have successfully produced a number of events there during the past summer and fall season.
That's a good idea. Thank you. I have one more question, and then I'm happy to have others ask questions or to move on and table this next week. I don't think we necessarily make a decision tonight. But is there any reason, John, for the purpose of that Karen has been referring to, of it being a tight schedule, that we couldn't reschedule our informational session and Australian ballot for a week after I mean, there's no limit when we can reschedule to, correct?
Correct. I think you are given discretion to schedule as appropriate.
So we
You
can
know-
schedule an Australian ballot, say, like Josh is suggesting, a week from March 1st, and then have an informational session online? Or is it?
Yeah,
we can still do that. Okay.
That's an option. The only logistical kind of hurdle there is that the school has already,
Oh,
the
that's right.
school, the Windham Southeast School District has already voted to have Australian ballot on
Right.
March 1st.
Yeah, no, so that's
And I think what I would say is, you know, Karen has a really good crew, and we'll pull it off, whatever the board thinks
and
is going to happen.
We
I
have a
also-
good crew.
I also
We do.
think, you know,
Absolutely.
we've got the PA, we can lean on us, the select board, and others who are the private citizens that are on this phone call who are likely to be helpful. And you know, if we need to make it work that way. So I would say unless the 2 of you want to make this decision right now, I would say let's table it till next week. I don't think that's going to change any scheduling.
No,
But
The only question I would have is if it would make it at all easier on anybody if we made that decision
Right.
this week.
It really doesn't, because the cutoff for candidates is Monday.
Okay.
And I'm gonna have, I already have most of the ballot done. So I was just waiting for the 26th, and it's gonna go to the printer that day. You know, it has to be printed, and the tabulator needs to be programmed. And so that's gonna happen. And LA, the vendor that we have for that, LHS, they're really sharp, and you know, they really work hard. The town report printer really does a good job and makes our lives pretty easy. You know, the first draft of the town report has already gone to the proofreaders, and there's just little nicky-nacky things here that need to be wrapped up.
And doesn't tabling it give you another week to see where you are in the preparation for the town report, and give you a better idea how much, if you'll need more time? Get that
No,
up?
not necessarily, David, because,
okay.
you know, the last pieces that'll go into the town report will be the warning. Probably the budgets are already being there. And that's about it.
So it sounds to me, and again, I think we'll table this, but it sounds to me like people are leaning, I mean, for me, the fact that there's a school vote on March 1st, that's a pretty compelling reason to try and hold our vote on March 1st also, for reasons. I think, as Eileen said, it's likely to increase turnout for that vote, which is good. But my sense is we're all in favor of the idea of mailing ballots to everybody. Is that correct? Okay.
Yes.
I would say, John, we should definitely plan on doing that.
I've already ordered the envelopes.
Okay,
So
good.
I was anticipating that. And you know, one of the things that we learned last year is Kim and I spent a morning folding ballots, and then about 10 o'clock, we had the idea of taking them to Brattleboro to a vendor who folded them for us. And that saved us a day right there.
Yeah.
You know? And this year we have our own folding machine, you know, so we're getting good at this. And it anything you guys want, we're going to be able to pull off.
Oh, boy.
Mr. Chairman?
Thank you.
Recorded. Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Well, first, my response to what the town clerk just said is, are you sure about that?
Yes.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll let him take that under advisement.
Yes.
I'll simply offer the input regarding my suggestion that the definitive discussion on this occur at a regular meeting when people who might wish to participate are aware that there's going to be such a discussion.
Yeah.
I wish to emphasize as a private citizen that town meeting, or a substitute for town meeting, is our meeting as the voters and citizens of the town of Putney. And as such, the Windham Southeast School Supervisory Union is a completely separate organization, so that we're not necessarily considering facilitating their turnout. We are considering facilitating our turnout.
Right.
I agree with you. I think if we can successfully do both at the same time, then to me that's valuable to everybody. But I hear you and agree with you. I mean, it used, obviously in the past that was a different conversation, but yeah, I mean, I think that I don't know. I mean, I certainly would lean towards holding town meeting day right around, or holding town meeting right around when we usually have town meeting, because that's when we usually have town meeting, and that's when people are used to it and thinking about it and so on and so forth. I feel like it sort of throws things off if we do it otherwise, but I think if everybody's okay with it, let's table it till next week and think on it for a week. Karen, go ahead.
Yeah, I have one comment. And I know, Geordie, you had your hand up. Jonathan, I recall having a special motion for the select board last year to be able to go with absentee ballots. You and I, we need to look into
Yeah,
that.
we could draft one, certainly.
Yeah.
I don't recall drafting it or whether it just came from the select board last year.
No, I think it came from VLCT.
Okay.
That
So why don't,
and
yeah,
Yeah, so-
voting.
that
I-
present thing for voting next week.
Yes,
My main goal was to update you on the changes that had just happened last Friday and today, and get you thinking about this article, expecting a decision at the meeting on the 26th.
Sounds good. Perfect. Thank you. All right.
Geordie had a question.
I had
John.
a quick question for John. Did you say that the informational meeting was 10 days before or within 10 days?
It's within 10 days.
So it could
Yeah,
be
so what we
3
did
days
last year is
before.
the Saturday before town meeting, we held the meeting.
Okay, because that seemed to
So-
work
So
well.
that window, and the only thing that makes me a little bit uncomfortable about that is many people may have already voted before the meeting.
Right,
Right.
You know, so having it earlier in the week, you know, either the 19th or, you know, of course, the 21st is President's Day, and that's school vacation week, you know, so that makes it a little bit harder. Maybe people go away. I don't know. So scheduling that will take some consideration.
All right. Any other questions or can we move on? All right.
Sheriff Anderson is here.
Oh,
Josh,
okay. So, yeah, why don't we then go to talk to Mark Anderson? Sheriff, with us?
Good evening.
good evening.
I've already said this, but I have a sort of technical glitch, so I'm on my phone, so I can't really see the whole gang. So I'm a little at a loss as to managing. So we're sort of bouncing things back and forth. But do you want to sort of just give us an overview of the proposed budget and why it's what it is and how you're looking at it?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Mark Anderson, Sheriff of Windham County. We've been providing a shared benefit with a consistent budget service to the towns of Putney and Westminster. So if that wasn't confusing enough, basically what that means is that we provide for the price of 40 hours a week, 80 hours of shared coverage per week between the towns of Putney and Westminster. At any given time during our scheduled periods, we have one deputy who is on in one of the two towns. And if a call came in while they were in the other town, they would respond from that location. So that's what I mean. What we're trying to do is establish a regional service that makes law enforcement services more accessible without having significant cost burdened by towns. 2 years ago, so 2020, I'm speaking calendar year, but most of our contracts run fiscal year, so this could get somewhat confusing. But about 2 years ago, we started this program in which I would consider it to be successful within the parameters that we are working to achieve. With COVID, certainly that has created some difficulties on my department's part in terms of trying to provide safe, healthy people to provide the service. If we are not present in the town, we are not billing the town. That is not money that we just pocket. It's either returned to the town through service or through a refund. But we have been working with personnel being out. With the difficulties of COVID, we understood that towns were contemplating a lot of challenges, especially as it came to budgets. Taxpayers were contemplating a lot of challenges as it came to work. So I believe it was last year and the year before, and Karen, please keep me honest on that, that we level funded our budget just in terms of trying to identify ways that the things changed. We did initially the first year we received some funding from the federal government that helped offset many of our burdens, which ultimately is how we were able to provide that level fund budget. This year, this fiscal year, starting July 1st of 2021, we received notice from the state of Vermont that our retirement contribution, which we are mandated to participate in, we have no option, that it was increasing significantly. And it basically what it comes down to was an increase of roughly $5 per hour worked for one of my employees who provides patrol services. We have no control over that. We've attempted to leave the retirement service or system, but have been told we cannot because we are obligated to participate. So we are looking at different ways. We are talking with the legislature to identify a mechanism to let us exit, or a mechanism to offset the cost so that it is not pushed back onto towns. We also did not receive in this fiscal year any of the federal funds that were initially proposed for counties. That money was redistributed within the state at the request of our congressional delegation and the governor. Needless to say, we still continue to struggle with COVID challenges. I've had some personnel who've been affected by it, as we are seeing more and more people become affected across the state. Unfortunately, we're not immune, and for us to continue providing the service that we provide, we have to raise our contract rate, and then we also worked in the increases just in the expenses that we've carried, such as the various insurances, vehicle costs. Supply chains have obviously been impacted, which also means increases in cost, which explains the increase for our contract this year. I've spoken probably in enough detail that there's questions already, so I'm happy to pause here in case that's the case.
Can I make a comment? So in the budget for the last 2 years, Town of Putney has budgeted $82,000 for the Sheriff's Department. The increase will be to $97,000. In the Select Board's packet tonight, and on this link that will guide you to the documents for this meeting, is the Windham County budget, and in there is the Sheriff's Department budget for the next fiscal year. And the bottom line for the Sheriff's Department, their budget is $401,216.55. I bring that to the board's attention because this is the first year that I've been sent this report. And I think it sheds a lot of light on how much it actually does cost for a department to run. And Sheriff Anderson, how many folks do you have in your department?
Total staff is approximately 27, give or take 1 or 2.
And how many are officers?
Approximately 24. 20,
And how many are level 3? Do you know off the top of your head?
I'm going to say roughly 12.
So you have 12 officers that can actually go to a call, do an investigation, so from start to finish. Now, your level 1 and your level 2 officers are not able to do that. Is that correct?
Not entirely. So first off, we have no level 1 officers. And for those of you not familiar, these are certifications offered by the Vermont Police Academy. A level 2 officer is capable of performing misdemeanor investigations, which are primarily what the town of Putney deals with. They require supervision, and or when they respond, they're required to turn over an investigation to a higher certified officer if it's outside of their scope of authority from state statute.
So that decreases your number significantly, especially if you're understaffed and underfunded.
Correct.
So Sheriff, can this number that we're looking at for the Windham County proposed budget is that's your total budget, 401,000?
It's not that simple.
I didn't think so.
So I actually operate 3 budgets. So explaining the office of the sheriff statutorily, I am responsible for the state to serve what's called civil process. Those are documents issued by the civil and family courts. And generally things like failing to pay credit cards, we serve the summons and complaint on behalf of the court, as well as judicial notices, orders. Basically, we are the mailman of the judicial process. We are also obligated to provide prisoner transport. So I have a state budget that accommodates the transports of people who are post arraignment. And so we ensure that they have the opportunity, defendants incarcerated have the opportunity to be present in court. That state budget covers 2 personnel, their salaries and benefits, and my salary. It provides no equipment, no vehicles, nothing of that nature. The second budget is the county budget, which you have in your possession, and that is what's covering my building. It covers training costs for what I say is my in-service training costs. That's what allows us to maintain our certifications each year. It covers legal services to a degree, but not entirely, just for the things that the county is obligated to provide services for. But it's easier to say what it doesn't provide. It doesn't provide any law enforcement services. It doesn't provide any dispatch services. Doesn't provide animal control services. It doesn't provide law enforcement liability insurance. It doesn't provide basically all of the things that the county is not obligated to provide. There's a Supreme Court case that found that counties are not able to provide the things unless the statute specifically allows it, which is why we have to have the third budget, which is a permissive in state statute that allows my office to enter into contracts with, say, towns and villages. So entirely, our law enforcement services are funded through these contracts. We do subsidize the towns because we are also able to perform things like construction details and a variety of other activity, escorting what we call super loads. These are massive trucks that are way larger than anything we're used to. They're the airplanes that are escorted down Los Angeles Boulevard, things like that. We do those regularly, and those are at a higher rate than we charge the towns, and that's ultimately how we pay for things like our cars and our equipment.
Los Angeles Boulevard, is that in Newfane?
It's right behind my office, yes.
You said that you subsidize the law enforcement for the towns as opposed to the other way around. Is that, I'm not questioning that, I'm just clarifying that that's the reality.
Yeah, I mean, if we look at the bottom line, we are subsidizing the purchase of equipment and vehicles. That all comes from the extra work that we do with construction companies throughout the year. What we don't subsidize is the law enforcement officers' hourly rate, and the specific insurance is tied to law enforcement service because that's the only way we have to fund it.
Okay, thank you. Eileen or David?
So the budget for law enforcement, can you feel free to share what that is? Not this budget from Windham County. My real question is, what percentage of the monies from the town? What percentage of that budget does it cover if you're subsidizing that?
So we provide 25% of our department budget, not specifically the county budget, is our law enforcement budget for everything that we do. So 75% of our operations are not law enforcement. And that's what we do to be able to offset the towns. We contract, this is from the top of my head, so don't quote me on it, but roughly $390,000 is our patrol budget for all the towns we service.
Got it.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
a question for Sheriff Anderson. You mentioned the existing situation where your deputy works both Putney and Westminster. Are you proposing to continue this during the coming fiscal year?
Yes, Mr. Fairman, that would be my proposal.
Eileen?
So the county itself, where does that revenue come from? Is that raised by the state?
Within your town budget, you have a line item called county tax, and that is
Okay.
where that
So
comes from.
So it's property tax funded, okay. And then in addition to that, so the contract that we would be considering is not in this budget, is what I'm hearing.
I would defer to Karen as to whether it's in the budget or not.
No, in the Windham, the sheriff's department.
No.
Okay.
That's correct, it is not. The county's not allowed to provide law enforcement or dispatching services. We have sought legislative support to change the mechanism to provide for regionalized methods to provide law enforcement through the county. Where those discussions go, we can all read the tea leaves and take our guess, but so far we have not been successful in that.
Okay, yeah, I'm just trying to understand how the mechanism that, where the money is coming, where the money that, the proposed budget for Putney, where that's actually coming from.
The money would come from the town.
No, okay, yeah.
So,
I mean, so I'm
We're all-
seeing.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm seeing in this, I guess I'm still confused. So I'm seeing in this Windham County proposed budget, health insurance, salaries and such like. And so I'm curious, is that the money that we would provide is on top of that? Because I'm assuming we're providing for wages and salary and health benefits and so on.
That's correct. So I do have 2.5 employees that are funded by the county. One is my office manager who takes care of all of our financial and contractual obligations. One is my administrative assistant who's also responsible for managing our civil process. And then I have a half-time clerk who helps with all of the other filing and paperwork that we're responsible for. So that's one and benefits that you see in there. In this year's budget, the assistant judges did provide for one-time funding for retirement for my deputies. The problem we run into as part of our contract is that we're required to notify the towns that we contract with per our contract in November what our rates will be. So in November 2020 or before November 2020, you should have received that letter which indicated my rates. In sometime before July 1st, in theory, we renewed our contract. And then after we renewed our contract, we were notified by the state that of the significant increase in our retirement that we had no prior knowledge of. What we ran into and what the effective issue became, we were not going to be able to continue providing services for this current fiscal year because we would be running at such a loss that we would not be able to afford to. What the assistant judges did was they provided one-time funding basically to cover the gap to get us to June 30 when we could discuss the new rates.
Okay.
So that will go down in the next county budget, which will be certainly a reduction in my budget with the county. But that was basically a stopgap so that we didn't eliminate law enforcement services to all the towns.
so correct me if I'm wrong, Sheriff, but my sense is that for the most part, your department is funded and or subsidized elsewhere, and more or less the contract money that we pay and other towns pay is really largely to cover the actual employment of the deputies that serve those towns and the benefits, et cetera. Is that roughly correct?
That's roughly correct.
Okay. Because if you take the 97 that's being proposed and divide it, we get roughly 2,000 hours a year, or that's what the contract is supposed to be. So divide that, it's $48.50 an hour. If you think of what a deputy gets paid plus benefits and pension, et cetera, that's probably pretty close to what we're spending is to cover the actual hours for time spent.
And then we do, it's not the full cost of the operation of the vehicle, but we do include the cost in the hourly rate for operating the vehicle. So that pays for gas. And I don't believe it even satisfies our insurance requirements.
And
Thank
so
you.
just to be clear, because I'm not sure, the money that you then use to cover what our contract doesn't pay for comes from this Windham County budget, or comes from your services provided in another?
Services provided elsewhere, yes.
Got it, okay, got it, right.
Which is why with our larger contracts, such as with Putney and Westminster, we try not to withdraw staff from those contracts just because it's easy to fall behind. But with our smaller towns where we're offering 6 hours a week or 12 hours a week or something to that effect, we try to have the understanding with the towns that during the summertime, we might be pulling on our full-time staff from those communities. You might see a bit of a dip in the summer because we're going to increase in the winter so that we can leverage the higher paying jobs in the summertime.
All right. Anybody else have any other questions or comments?
Eva has her hand up.
I have a question. Sheriff Anderson, I certainly appreciate the work that you do, and it's a public service job, and it's a pretty challenging job, and I'm surprised that you're willing to do it. But anyway, may I ask you a question about your two deputies that came over from Hinsdale? I saw in the paper where they put their defense up. So far, I've not heard anything else about the situation. Would you explain to the people here what I'm talking about?
Sure. I will ask the chair if he wants me to, since this is off topic, but I'm happy to.
As long as it's brief.
I will make it brief, Mr. Chair. So the article that Ava's referring to was with regards to the publishing of what's known as the Lorry list. Vermont has a similar, though extremely different mechanism for how this is published, but basically it's a notice to defense attorneys that a person, a law enforcement officer, has what's known as exculpatory information or information that could benefit a defendant in a prosecution. This comes from two sets of case law. One is known as Brady, in which basically it notifies that a prosecutor must disclose if they're aware of any information that could potentially harm it. An example of one such instance in Vermont is that there was a law enforcement officer who stopped a person, I believe it was for speeding, and issued a ticket for a parking violation. This is documented in Vermont Digger if anybody wants to look deeper. But it's not so much that this is necessarily a problem, but the prosecutor in that case is saying, well, that's not the violation that was committed. So a defense attorney could represent that a client of theirs was issued a charge for something they didn't do. It's incredibly subjective to the prosecutor, or in New Hampshire to the police chief who issues the notice. New Hampshire operates through a system that the Attorney General's office created, whereas Vermont operates through each of its state's attorney's offices and through the centralized state's attorney's office in Montpelier. So our systems operate differently. I can't discuss the specifics of either case because we initiated internal investigations, which are confidential as a matter of law. However, I do want to share that it's my department's expectation when we hire people to do a very thorough background investigation. We're back when we did internal investigations background investigations for New Hampshire officers. We would ask and inquire if they were on the Lorry list, though we were not even entitled to it because at that time it was a confidential list. So sometimes we would ask and not get the answer that we were looking for. And that's beyond our control. So I do anticipate in the future, once our internal investigations are closed, to have at least some report out. It might be nothing more than we found nothing wrong. It might be more than that. I can't comment because it's still active, but I would like to at least close the loop for the public since it was a public matter.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that list is a good thing myself.
All right. If there are no further questions, then Sheriff, thank you very much. And we will be, we're finalizing the budget, so we'll be looking at that and putting it in. And Karen, you have included that 97,000 in our proposed budget, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Be having final discussions on that, and we'll keep you posted.
I
Thank
appreciate
you,
it.
Sheriff Anderson.
Take
Yes,
care.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see
Have
you.
a good night.
And you as well.
Josh, I need a second. I need 1 second.
No problem.
Still with us, Geordie?
I'm still here. You gonna introduce this next one, or do you want me to?
We're not quite there, Jordy.
Yeah, I'm finding out how we're gonna proceed. Or we're not?
We have draft warning review first,
We're gonna wing it.
but we're just gonna, we could probably let Jordy go if we move it up.
Yeah, I was gonna move Geordie up so he can depart. And I think I'd like to move John and Jane up too.
That's fine.
Yeah,
John and Jane are for cannabis or for something else?
Yeah.
No, they're for the fair and impartial.
Impartial, yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah, that makes more sense. Sorry.
Well,
I'm
they might like to be
Move here.
in for cannabis. We can't speak for them, can we? Ah.
no secrets, Eva.
Hey, it's legal, it's legal in Massachusetts, and I'm telling you, it's also, they've developed something that is, just a spot of it is great for pain. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so Karen, you want to go ahead and, so you would like to do Jordy next and then
John and Jane. And then I
okay.
believe Tim is here for the cannabis. Is that correct, Tim?
Tim is busy with cannabis right now.
All right. Yeah, let's hear from Geordie and
God, I
then
miss
John and
Eva.
Jane.
Okay, Jordy, go ahead.
Okay, so this has to do with solar, and the solar farms primarily. Karen, Putney currently does not tax any solar. Back in 2008 or 9, I'm not exactly sure. The state exempted the first 10 kilowatts of solar that anybody had, exempted from taxation. And at town meeting, the town voted to have all solar, any size, be exempt from property tax. Then a few years after that, I was not involved with the town at the time. The state raised the limit to 50 kilowatts of tax exempt solar, and then anything above that is taxable. And when 2008 or 9, when the town voted, the idea of the 150 kilowatt farms that we see wasn't on anybody's radar. So Karen asked me how much tax are we foregoing? We have a couple of 500 kilowatt and another 150 kilowatt solar farms proposed for Putney have going through the certificate of public good process. I think 2 of them are approved. One of them is coming. So we looked at that, and there's a website called, I think, PV Value, which is the industry or the industry standard, but there's some fairly specific information you need. So I worked through with our advisor at the state on how to project a value for the ones that are coming up, and how to, and what we would gain with the ones we already have. So we went through the ones that are proposed. Are rough numbers. They're probably within a few $100s of taxable value of tax raised, but what it would come out to is, if we were to tax solar installations above 50 kilowatts, the municipal tax raised would be, at this year's rate, roughly $11,000. So the calculation on the PV value site, without the help of my district advisor, I wouldn't have been able to do it, but you get a number there, and then you take by statute 70% of that, and that's what we're able to tax. So the 2 500 kilowatt proposed ones would be paying roughly $3,000 each, a little under that, and then down from there. And
So can I make a comment?
Yes.
Thank you, Geordie, for that presentation. We don't know how many more solar projects will come into Putney. And, you know, the town has the opportunity to, you know, have a say in that. But if we get bigger solar projects and we're able to obtain property tax revenue, that's going to help the town. What I've noticed is, and I've said this out loud a few times, Putney is rich in property tax exemptions and poor in property tax revenue. We need to be creative and find other means of revenue to offset increasing property taxes. And that's what's driving me this year. And so I'm looking at everything possible. And it's not to say that, you know, we're going to move ahead with them, but this is an article on our draft warning. And whether it stays there or not, you know, will be based on, you know, the select board's decision, obviously. But again, right now, it's not easy to find property tax revenue, but I'm still working on it.
So, Geordie, can I ask you to clarify? You said that 11,000 that would be generated was from proposed future installations, not including any of our already existing. Is that right?
no, it includes all the existing ones, which were valued. Most of them went in 2013, one in 2014, one in 2016.
Okay.
Although the one at Putney School that is 360 kilowatts is non-taxable, so I didn't value that one.
Yeah.
The values are good for 20 years, so next townwide reappraisal doesn't affect the values. So I have values on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of them that are pretty solid numbers, and then 3 that are they're not in place, so I don't really know exactly what some of the things would be, but it wouldn't vary by much.
So the 50,000 that the state does not tax, are tax exempt below 50,000 kilowatt.
50.
50 kilowatts.
50,000 watts. Yeah.
Yeah.
Those, they're statutorily exempt from us taxing them. Is that?
That's
That is-
correct.
Yes.
So there is one, the smallest one in town that's over 50 kilowatts is 57.1 kilowatts, and we would, and it's an economic assessment or appraisal. So the projections have to do with money back and stuff, but we're only taxing them on 7.1 kilowatts.
So
To the tune of $35 a year. I mean, we would be taxing them on 7.1.
okay. So I have brought up before, and I just wonder how this plays into this. You don't assess solar installations in doing, because of this exemption. If a person has, for example, a freestanding solar near their house or at their property, you do not assess that as a value. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And that's statutorily exempt from being assessed.
Right. Initially, it was 10 kilowatts statutorily,
Right.
and the town voted everything. But right now, everything up to 50 is statutorily,
Right.
and there are no home units that are 50 kilowatts or more.
So I'm curious, and I don't want to belabor it too much, but I'm curious as to how that is justified in the reality that that's an imbalance in taxation for those that can afford solar, and how and that this is a never mind. Forget the legislative question, not a listener question, but I'm just a little surprised that that's the case. That you can have something that directly, because my impression is it directly adds to sale value.
Right.
It would skew our grand list and our CLA to have those not valued appropriately given based on the sales. So I don't really understand that. But anyway, legislative question. All right. Does David or Eileen?
I just want to make a general comment, and thank you, Karen, for looking for these things. It seems pretty clear to me that things are getting more and more expensive, and we don't have new revenue streams, and it's getting harder and harder for the people who can afford taxes the least to stay in this town. So thank you for doing that. And Geordie, thank you for putting this projection together. And in my opinion, I think we should look seriously at, whether we should tax this or not. I think, it might be a good idea to do that. But anyway, I just wanted to make those two.
Yeah, I'm in general agreement that, especially with the larger farms that are coming in, possibly taking advantage of the fact that they will not be taxed currently in Putney. It's not a lot of revenue right now, but it could become serious revenue down the line. I'm totally in favor of putting the warrant article on the warning, because then the voters are going to decide one way or the other whether they want the extra revenue or they want to continue to exempt solar. So I'm completely on board with that concept.
It also occurs to me, and I don't know how this would work from an accounting standpoint, but we might look at the income from taxes on solar installations going into a fund for use on energy.
Right. With
Mhm.
climate change,
Whether-
yes.
No, that would be awesome. I like it.
I should add also, the solar they pay their school tax directly to the state. So
Right.
the town would not be receiving school tax from them, just municipal tax.
And that's part of the reason why that number is so, I mean, it seems to me like 11,000 is surprisingly low,
Yeah.
given the actual monetary value of installations like that. That's probably part of the reason why, is because it doesn't include school tax. It would just be.
Yeah.
All right, good. Well, thank you. Much appreciated. Any other further questions or comments? All right, thank you.
I will see you all later. Thank you.
Thanks, Ray.
Hi,
Have a good-
Marty.
Okay, so Jane and John, you will be next.
Hi, everybody. This is John and Jane's here. Jonathan invited us to come and just, I guess, say a couple of words about this petition that was signed by about 130 Putney residents. And I just give you just a little short description. 5 years ago, the state of Vermont adopted a policy called the Fair and Impartial Policing Policy, which separated local policing from federal law enforcement, including deportations. But under the last administration, that policy in our state was weakened, and the result was the creation of loopholes in this state policy. Now, 7 towns, which are Burlington, South Burlington, Winooski, Hartford, Norwich, Richmond, and recently Brattleboro, as well as the Addison County Sheriff's Office, have all adopted updates to their policy along the lines of what we're proposing to ensure the separation of local policing from federal law enforcement. The updates to the current policy aim to uphold the principles of equal treatment under the law by protecting Vermont residents from biased policing by profiling based on immigration status. We're hoping that Putney residents will join this effort and urge the sheriff to make similar improvements as the other 7 towns and the 1 county to strengthen our local Windham County fair and impartial policing policy. This policy ensures that local policing will stay separate from what federal immigration authorities do. Local law enforcement works for us Putney residents. We can hold them to the same standards of human rights that we want in our community. People should feel safe at home and during travel. And by passing, if this non-binding resolution is passed, we would be sending a message to the sheriff's office that we want his office to adopt the changes that the other towns have adopted. And I just, in closing, should add that the Vermont Attorney General has reviewed the updated procedures in all of the 7 towns, as well as Addison County's updated policing policy, and has found every single one of them to be in compliance with Vermont state law and practices. So that's what this article is about, and happy to answer any questions.
I have a question.
Eileen, yeah.
So I'm assuming that the reason that we're doing this is a non-binding resolution. You mentioned Brattleboro, they have their own police department, so they were able to do it directly, I assume.
Right.
So the reason that this is a non-binding resolution is because we don't have our own police department.
We don't, I mean,
We're contracting with an agency we don't really have.
Sure, and right. It's advice, it would just give the sheriff an advisory sense of what the town residents feel. But it's definitely non-binding.
And the article itself says that the updates are available at the town hall. I'm wondering if we can, I mean, I think that's great, but can we put those online so that they're accessible?
Can you repeat your question?
It says at the bottom of this resolution, it says the updates. The resolution says we're going to adopt the separately attached updates.
Yes.
So are those online?
No, but I consulted with legal counsel today. And this is a non-binding article. And you know, the select board can choose to leave it on the draft warning or take it off. John, what we're gonna need is those documents that you're referring to in your article. Because Jonathan can mail them out with the absentee ballots, but people are gonna wanna see that document. Because the way your article was written, and Larry has added language to it, so it's legally thorough. Because there was a question, because what is this documentation? So at the end of your article, we've added the language, the updates are available at the town hall and will be mailed to voters that request them. So if we're doing absentee ballots, and I'm not going to speak for the town clerk because I know how much of a responsibility it is to get absentee ballots out already. And I don't know how long your documentation is. And if he has to fold that and put them in with the absentee ballots, that could be quite a chore.
Are you, when you say documentation, are you talking about the 6 things that we listed on the 3rd page? The 6 areas that we would like to be corrected?
I didn't,
What we have in front of us is an article for the warning. And unless I'm missing something, we don't have the actual
Right, I don't see it
updates. So, you know, if I was a voter going into the ballot box with this, the way that this is written, I'd be like, I don't know what you're talking about. So
Yeah, it's just a half page,
Run it
6
down.
points. That it's not long, it's just 6 points that we included with the petition. We understand why it wasn't printed because it was alluded to, it was referred to rather than embedded into the resolution or the article.
Okay.
Is there any way of getting that? It's like a half a page.
It looks like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what Karen was saying is if it's, you know, 10 pages long, that might be problematic, but if it's a page or something, it may be,
It's about a half a page.
okay.
and it was with the petition.
Yes, definitely.
So Jonathan, can you confirm that?
I have 2 different, you know, I have this one. Is this what you're talking about, John? Can you see? Are those the points?
It's 6 points, 1, 2, 3, 4,
They're
5,
numbered.
6.
I don't have anything that has numbers on it.
Oh,
I'm still going through all of the petitions.
yeah, the petition, refers to,
Page 3.
page 3.
Yeah.
And it should have been attached, but we certainly can get that to you. And as I said, it's not 10 pages, it's a half a page. It is 6 sentences.
Okay,
And of course, I agree with you, Karen, the voters should have access to that.
yes. And we can make it available here at Town Hall, but then, people would have to
Sure.
stop in. But if we put them in with absentee ballots, then they'll have all the.
And certainly we could scan it and put it in the town meeting part of the clerk's website. So it'd be available there.
Sure.
But I don't, in the folder that I have of petitions, I do not have that 6 numbered bullet points on anything. So John, you have my email. Just send that
Yep.
to me when you have a chance.
Send that to you tonight.
Sounds good. And just to be clear, for the reason this is non-binding, because it's not something that we are mandating the sheriff to do. It's because we are asking or urging the sheriff to do it, and we can't enforce that. So that's why it's non-binding, is because it's unenforceable on our part. So I just want that clear in plain language. So and the sheriff, even if we do this, the sheriff could still choose not to do that. My guess is, knowing this current sheriff, that he's likely to be amenable to considering and adopting this, but I don't know. All right, are there any other questions or comments? All right.
Thank you, John and Jane.
Thank
Yes.
you.
Thank you both.
Yes, thank you. I want to say this, you say the sheriff, it's the sheriff educating his staff. And that's important, that it's not the sheriff gets this material, but that's educating his staff. That's so important.
Right.
Right, but it's, yes, I agree, and that's an important point. Thank you. But it's up to the sheriff to make that choice to do that and or
Yeah.
mandate it with his
Yeah.
department. It's not up to us to mandate it
Yeah.
for the much as we might like to or choose to
Yes, I understand that.
ability. So, all right, thank you.
Thank you.
So next thing I have, I believe, is the 5-person select board. Karen, do we have somebody speaking to that, or is that on here as a reminder?
We have cannabis and Tim Morris. Would you like to speak about that?
Yes, hopefully, is my audio working now?
It is.
Yeah.
So good at the Zoom technology. Thankfully. I was asked just to come and speak a little bit. I'm not exactly sure what the select board would like to hear, but it was suggested I might talk a little bit about sort of potential benefits of retail cannabis sales in Putney. I wanted to be sure to say one thing before I actually got over to the sort of more substantive but theoretical benefits. That I'm a pretty big believer in the democratic process. In my opinion, when registered voters exercise their right to vote on an issue put to them by the legislature, it's a benefit in itself. So I wanted to be sure to say that just because I think it has a tendency to get lost in the mix. In terms of potential benefits of a dispensary, I see several potential benefits. One, it brings people into Putney who have money to spend, potentially supporting other local businesses. I have some concerns about the kind of continued vitality of Putney Village and the continued success of local businesses. While there's no current provision within the state law to benefit local communities through sharing of sales tax, there's talk, and I believe it's moving along, hopefully, potential that the state is going to find a way to share at least a small percentage of the tax income they are expecting to bring in from retail sales with host communities. I noted that I found one sort of projection, and this is a pure projection, that the Tax Foundation projected that Vermont tax income from retail sales within several years of starting sales could total around $27 million. In addition, I think this is perhaps under fear of missing out. I'm a little concerned about businesses in town losing business to communities that do opt in. Brattleboro opted in town meeting day last year. And my sort of primary concern was thinking, what happens if Rockingham were to pass a opt-in vote? And indeed, they did set a meeting for town meeting day. I also wanted to add that while people, when they think of retail sales, tend to think of dispensaries, that isn't necessarily the form that a retail sales might take, because the state envisions that small farms may be able to do direct sales. And I believe that the retail sales provision would play into that. I also wanted to note that retail sales and this additional integrated licensees question doesn't really, while the state requires towns to opt in before licenses would be granted to retail or integrated licensee businesses, there's no opt-in provision for other cannabis businesses by my understanding. So cultivation, potentially manufacturing could occur even without an opt-in. Obviously, they would have to be granted a license. Sorry, I'm taking one last look at my notes. I'd sort of jotted down. I also just wanted to note that one way or the other, as long as things progress at the legislature, which there's some question about when it will happen. As of now, they're expecting retail sales to begin in October of 2022. I think that there is some benefit to a potential dispensary, and I should add, I don't have any personal intention of starting a dispensary, but that there is likely a benefit in being an early an early business to get in, simply in terms of having their sort of name recognition. I think there's already going to be something of an uphill battle when it comes to bringing tourists in off the highway to shop at a Vermont dispensary, because many, at least in this area of Vermont, because so many of the people who would be coming up are traveling through Massachusetts, which allows billboards and advertising. And there are numerous billboards in I-91 in Massachusetts advertising the various dispensaries. So that's sort of an unknown at this point. I don't know if that answers sort of what was hoped for in terms of benefits.
Thank you. I believe, Tim, correct me if I'm wrong, you have submitted and have gotten approved a petition for these articles. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, good. So you're not requesting anything from us. This is really informational, because this is,
Right.
we're not making a decision as to whether to include these or not. These have been legally petitioned.
Yes.
So-
And I can vouch for that too.
No, and I would tend to agree with Tim's sentiment. The implication that voters should be able to weigh in on it makes sense to me. Are there other questions or comments?
Can I just make a comment? Because we've been hearing about this topic for a while now. And I've had John Johnson following this because he does have a legal background. And the state is still not sure. John, do you want to fill in the select board a little bit just about, retail sales and, what the percentage towns might end up with and how this bill continues to change?
The Cannabis Control Board is still in process of determining fees. One of the members of the Cannabis Control Council, I think it's called, is Tim Wessel from Brattleboro. And he's been advocating for greater revenue sharing with local municipalities. Right now, it's kind of set up like, it's kind of like liquor. When a store gets a liquor license, the state gets most of the money and the town gets a pittance. We don't get anything on the full bar license, which is over $1,000. Some of the fees for big operations are, the state fee is going to be $60,000. And right now, the initial proposal was that the towns would get like $100, kind of an administrative processing fee. You can also only get tax revenue if you already have a local option sales tax. So that you can't, towns are not going to will not have an opportunity to have a marijuana only tax or cannabis only tax. You have to do it on everything. I think Brattleboro has a 1%. We haven't done that here in Putney. So there's still a lot in flux on this. But just from the clerk network, lots of towns are putting this on the issue or on the ballot. It failed last week in Ludlow. Ludlow, there was a petition and they had a vote and it lost. And so they petitioned for a revote and they lost again. So not every town is on board with this. But it's a valid petition. The petition language itself, that came right from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. They drafted that language. So that's where the two articles came from. And again, it's a valid petition with sufficient signatures to place it on the ballot.
Sounds good.
So I have one more comment. I think it's a good revenue source for some towns. Do I want to see a 1% sales tax on our businesses in Putney? I'm not in favor of that, only because of COVID years. And some of our small businesses are struggling. And, I can't see taxing them. But if the state comes up with a solution and wants to hand towns money, I'm all for it. So, I think we need to follow this a little further and let the voters decide. And then we can, see where it goes. But I think it's, thank you, Tim, for presenting it.
Yeah, and
Mr. Chairman,
yes, go ahead, Mr. Freeman.
a correction to what the town manager just said. A local option sales and use tax is not levied on the business. It is levied on the customers in precisely the way that the state's tax in this regard is. Further in that regard, while when a town attempts to put on a local option tax, the people say, businesses say, oh my God, if you do that, people won't come here. Well, consider on a $100 restaurant check, an extra $1 is the local option tax. Now, who's paying $100 for a restaurant meal cares about an extra $1? This is why this argument is actually a red herring. We should certainly consider having a local option tax, except for one thing. How many businesses are there in Putney which actually serve retail customers other than the places where we buy food and may go to eat? And the answer is there are not very many. So in terms of coming back now to what the gentleman speaking in favor of the cannabis articles was saying, attracting people to Putney, the real question is attracting them to Putney to do what? Other than eat, there really isn't much else that's going to attract people to Putney as opposed to anywhere else. And I should further clarify something that he said, which is he said in Massachusetts there are cannabis billboards. Indeed, there are. In Vermont, there are no billboards.
Right. That I think that was the point that he was making. Yes. Yeah, I mean, a local option tax, that's something we've never considered, at least in my time, and I know those are controversial at times. But I think that at this moment, and the nature of these articles as they're presented is more sort of a simple interpretation of it from my perspective, is more about people's sentiment about having those stores in town. Whether they at some point provide additional revenue to the town through some vehicle is still to be found out. But it's whether people just want marijuana stores in town or not. So we'll find out.
Correction to Mr. Fairman. People come to town because they come to Landmark College, the Putney School, the Greenwood School. They come to go hiking. There's many reasons other than to eat at the Gleanery or shop at the general store or the co-op. So that's a correction, Mr. Fairman.
Mr. Chairman.
Can I?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I had a question about whether this would be adding any kind of administrative burden on our part.
John, do you know, I assume it would be sort of like the liquor.
I think it would. I think there's zoning implications that would be handled. I think it's going to be a lot like liquor. If Hidden Springs, is that too close to a school? I think that's a local decision. I don't know Hidden Springs wants to sell cannabis, but that would be I think that's a local consideration. Just like with liquor.
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
Some of this discussion has led me to believe that people are thinking these proposed articles are somehow advisory. They are not. They read, shall the town authorize? These are binding articles.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm aware of that.
And I agree with Mr. Fairman also, but I still think that you still have to get through zoning, and it would be like liquor. When liquor license renewals come through my office, I present them to the select board as the local liquor control board. They're approved locally, and then they're approved in Montpelier. I envision a similar system for marijuana licenses.
So in that
Again-
scenario, is there going to be are we gonna become the cannabis commissioners?
Board.
You want that on a business card?
No.
Again, there's still a lot of flux, and I agree with Mr. Morris that it's the anticipated October 22, October of this year. But the first hurdle to either any consideration of that in the town of Putney is the voters have to say yes. If the voters say no, then we move on and consider other things.
Or you can do a revote
Or you could do a revote. Yeah.
in August.
Yes, we can. We have a scheduled election. The state office primary is in August, and it could be considered then.
All right. Are there any other questions or comments? All right. Good. Thank you. So Karen, are we wanting to discuss 5-person select board, or is that just
No,
it's an article that's there?
it's an article, but I just want to let the board know that, so when Larry Syson's office, our town attorney, reviewed our draft warning, he made a comment to me that we have to be legally thorough with the articles, even though they might have been petitioned from someone in the community. Clarification had to be sought on this particular one. And I know this article has been brought up to the board. We've discussed this in other meetings. So what Larry has done, when it was first presented to us, it didn't really state when the election would be made. So we're all in agreement that we want, this petition asks to increase the board size from 3 to 5. And it didn't really state, the terms, which by state statute, there are terms for adding new board members. And what Larry has added for language is, with the election of said additional members to occur at the next annual town meeting or special meeting warned that purpose. So it gives voters the knowledge that if this article passes, that either at the next special meeting, or if somebody petitions for a special meeting to add those two, they can do it at that time. The town of Brookline, Vermont recently increased their board, and they had 3 separate articles. So they went from 3 to 5. They also indicated, that they would have a special meeting to elect those 2 that needed to be added, because they're newly created positions, not necessarily vacant. And then the third article was to add stipend to the budget, because this board cannot increase the line item budget for select board stipends. Only the voters can do that. So there's a lot, we have a petition, but there's a lot that goes along with it, and it has to be thoughtfully crafted. And the petition that was sent to John Johnson's office needed clarification, and Larry has done that, and it is the select board's responsibility to make sure that, all petitions are thorough and understood when it comes to being voted on.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Mr. Farmer.
First, it is my understanding, which I believe is correct, that the petition was drafted by an attorney. And so therefore, we may be dealing with attorney versus attorney here. Now, the article as proposed, oh, by the way, and I should mention that there is no doubt that as Vermont statute says that this is a matter that voters decide, you have no option but to put this article on the warning because it is voters' decision. Now, in that regard, apparently your attorney has added that that these new select board seats would be filled at the next annual meeting, that is a year hence, or at a special meeting, which of course you may call if you wish, or also, as we know, voters may call. Now, I have contradictory legal advice here from the Office of the Vermont Secretary of State, which I can share with you, which is from the moment that the article passes, there are 2 vacant select board seats, which per another Vermont statute with which we became familiar last fall, shall be filled forthwith. And that the options are either you appoint them or you or the voters call a special town meeting where they are elected. Now, actually, there is, and I'm also told that there actually is the third option, which probably would not apply to us, but just as a matter of interest. If such an article is passed by a floor vote at town meeting, voters proceed immediately to hear candidacies for those vacant select board citizens positions, and the citizens elect their new select board members right there. Now, that doesn't apply to us, but I will share with you the advice that I have received from the Office of the Vermont Secretary of State, that as the vacant select board positions shall be filled forthwith certainly would not extend a full year until the next annual meeting.
No, and I think I may have misunderstood Karen, but I think that the article that at least I'm looking at does not include with each additional member occurring at the next annual town meeting, because there is additional language in there that Karen referred to, that it would be at the next additional town meeting or at a special meeting. So, but forthwith, but yes, I hear you. I have read through the statutes, and I can't say that I have 100% clarity on what exactly the implications are, and what we haven't discussed this, what exactly the will of the select board would be as to how to proceed, whether we would try to fill them forthwith or whether we would have a special election, or I'm not sure. We haven't gotten to that point. So,
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
In that regard, just to clarify, yes, if the vacant seats are created, yes, you do have the option of appointing people, of course, who have to come forward first. But alternatively, voters have the option of petitioning a special town meeting, as we always have. Right. So it's always going to be a choice. But I'm simply submitting that waiting until the next annual meeting, which is a year hence, would not be allowed. And I can provide legal advice in that regard, which I shall forward to all of you.
Okay, thank you. David or Eileen, comments?
Karen and I have talked about the mechanism for the 2 additional seats, if this should pass, and it was not clear whether it was considered vacant if you were newly creating them, and that's what led to this additional language. I would be inclined to follow the lead of other towns that have already done this. If we were to, if we were to go down this road, because they have done it, there is clearly some confusion about how we would fill those positions.
Right.
John, can you comment on whether, if a petition is presented that has been legally petitioned, are we obligated to put that article on as it is written in the petition?
I think that's really more a question for Larry Slayson.
Okay,
I don't know the answer to that.
okay, because I agree with.
I mean, when I saw the petition, I thought it was inadequate. You know, it was like, well, what's going to happen if it passes? What happens?
Yeah.
You know?
It sounds like Larry is saying through Karen that we can't put it on as there.
Right. I mean, it
Legally, it's the select board's responsibility to have petitions, articles legally thorough, is
Okay.
what Larry told me.
Well, I
Now,
think.
here's a thought. Okay, now select boards can also add petitions on their own.
Mhm.
And if it's still confusing, the article as written with Larry's review and revisions, this board can add, a petition that states that no less than 60 days from the vote, you can add 2 members through a special meeting by Australian ballot. So again, in August, and I think August might be too far out, to have a special meeting and to be able to put it on the state ballot, instead of having an extra meeting, but that's an option.
Yeah, I think I would be inclined to break this up into, like, have the article as it was originally petitioned, and then have another article contingent on its passing, on how we might go about filling those 2 positions.
right, and increasing the budget to provide the stipend. I think you need
Right.
2. I think you need 2 additional articles. And I
Yeah,
agree.
although Karen was saying that we're not, we could put it on the warrant though.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. The select board can put whatever they want on the warning
And
So-
then we add it to the budget.
Okay,
and add it to the budget.
so what I'm gathering is that the stipend, I mean, as it stands right now, we know what the stipend is. If we add 2 new board members, they would be entitled to the same stipend, right? Or is that not inherent in passing that article?
No, they would be entitled to that stipend.
That's what I
Day
would,
one.
so,
Yes. So you would have a 3rd article, Josh. Can I read the language from the town of Brookline or Brookfield? Sorry, it's the town of Brookfield.
sure.
All right, so this is based off the first article for 5-member select board. If the above is passed per Brookfield Town Meeting standards, set the date of a special election by Australian ballot, not less than 60 days from this vote, for adding 2 new select board members. Anyone interested in being elected will need to submit a candidate consent form to the town clerk 30 days from the date of this vote. And the statute is 17 V.S.A. 2650 B2A. Special election date will be determined by the actual town meeting 2022 adjusted date. So from March 1st, if we have our meeting, you have to have a special election in 60 days.
So that would be the beginning of May.
May 1st.
Right.
If we were to add that as an article.
Specific language, yeah.
Right.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
I am looking at the statute and probably there is a mistake in the town manager's citation of statute because 17 V.S.A. Section 2650 B2A says nothing of what she quoted.
Well, I'm reading it from the town of Brookfield annual meeting warning.
Well, I
that
think
was
I'd
held
better,
On May
I think
22nd,
I
2021.
think I'd better read the statute.
No,
The statute says, if 2 additional select board member positions are created, they shall be for terms of the same length. But if the terms of the new positions are to be for 2 years, when the additional select board members are first elected, one shall be elected for 1 year and the other select board member for 2 years. That is what 17 V.S.A. 2650 B2A says. So I suspect that your citation is incorrect, but I'm not sure what your correct citation is.
Right. So the language that Karen presented is probably correct, but it's probably under a different statutory citation, as you said. So I think
I disagree. What I think Brookfield said is we're going to follow that statute, and we're electing 2 select board members to 2-year terms. But the first time that we go through this, one is going to be for a 1-year term and one is going to be for a 2-year term.
Right.
So if this article passes as petitioned, we get 2 new select board members serving 2-year terms. But the statute says the first time you elect those, you elect one for 2 years and
Right.
one for 1 year. And then the way that works out is every year the town will vote a 3-year select board member and a 2-year town select board member starting in 2024 or 2020, I guess 2023.
I remember reading that in an opinion piece from Garrett Baxter as well, clarifying that from the statute. So I think what we need to do before our next meeting is clarify that. And John, it would be my sense that this would be really for the Secretary of State's office to clarify. Is that correct or not?
I sent the petition language to the Secretary of State's office, and they said, it looks like a valid petition, you need to put it on. And you know what? I just wish that the people who had prepared and presented the petition had planned what would happen if they won.
Right.
You know, it struck me that, okay, if we win, we want this to happen. And they didn't. So
Jamie has her hand up.
Jamie, go ahead.
Hi, Jamie Contois, Town of Putney. I just had reached out to Laura Chapman, who submitted the petition, to ask if she had been invited to speak to the petition. She said she was not invited tonight, as the other folks, to speak to the petition. And it was submitted a month ago, and she hadn't heard any concerns around any of these issues. So I just wondered if there was a reason that Laura hadn't been invited to speak to the petition, or why these concerns hadn't been raised ahead of time with the petitioner.
first, let me say that I'm not aware that Laura Chapman submitted the petition. The
Right,
petition was
me
presented
either.
to me by Fletcher Proctor. That's who dropped it off at my office. And the rumor mill had somebody else circulating the petition. So I was not aware that Laura was involved.
So were any of the petitioners invited to speak to any of these concerns?
Oh, I'd say that we're discussing them right now as they're coming up. We're in the middle of trying to get this warrant together, and we're realizing that there are pieces missing on this particular article that we're trying to suss out right now in public meeting.
Right. So Jamie, I had legal counsel Larry Slyson review the warning like I do every year. And he brought it to my attention as well. And, you know, we had noticed it, but knowing it was a petition, I was not aware that, you know, it's the board's responsibility to make sure that it's legally thorough per Larry's directive. So Larry has added that language to make it clear for the voters. So, I mean, it is on the warning and the board needs to decide. And if Laura wants to speak to it next week, you know, I'll make sure that, you know, she has an invite, but I myself didn't know this was Laura's petition.
Thank you for the clarification, and
You're welcome.
I'll let her know that.
Okay,
All right, so, yeah, I'm, sense of the board as where this leads us. I mean, I think that, we obviously need to get this clear and correct before we
right.
print articles. So, if we're voting on those at our next meeting, we have to have them clear before then. So, again, I would, I mean, I guess I find it a little bit, well, if John submitted it to the Secretary of State's office and they said it was an appropriate petition, I guess then it probably, because of what Karen said, it probably falls to us to figure out what additional language. I guess I've always been under the impression that if an article is presented, or if an article is petitioned, then we don't change the language of that petition, but I may be wrong about that. So I think that where Larry's advice would come in, and given that Larry gave some language to change it, I may be wrong, but my sense would be where Larry's advice would come in to have it be correct is that we have to add additional articles to clarify, because otherwise incomplete. So,
Yeah, I'd be inclined to leave the original petition as is and then add other articles to clarify.
Okay,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, Mr. Fairman.
question for the town clerk. When you submitted the petitioned article for review by the Office of the Secretary of State, was that before or after Attorney Slayson amended it?
Before. The language that I emailed, I sent the Secretary of State's office, Election Division, the language that I emailed you today.
Well, this is interesting because I was unaware, and apparently you were unaware at that point that he had it had been amended upon advice of counsel.
That is correct.
Yes, fine. So that explains why we, in a sense, for cost purposes here, it was just one of those things. So I will. I got your message. I will send to our town clerk and to our select board and our town manager the advice that I have received from the Office of the Secretary of State in this regard. You'll have it tomorrow morning.
Okay, thank you, Howard.
thank you.
And we can take it from there. Clearly, there's a solution, and the solution is it passes. We have a special town meeting. People run for it, and somebody gets elected.
Correct.
Yeah.
And then you also have to deal with the budget piece.
Right,
Yeah.
they won't get paid the first year.
Hey,
On probation.
I'm
You
kidding.
We get paid?
Because all select board members are
We
just.
get paid for this?
Not enough, David.
All right. Well, now that everything is just crystal clear, we can move on.
Where are we at?
So,
We've got
Recommendations.
recommended vacancies.
Oh, yeah. So in your packets, I'm gonna need a motion from this board regarding the social agencies. So the Equity and Inclusion Advisory Committee had presented 4 agencies to add to the social agency appropriations. Our policy states that agencies can petition to be added to the appropriation list, or the select board can make a decision to add them. What is your desire for these 4? The Roots Social Justice Center, Out in the Open, Susie Community Farm, and Atawi Project are all presented to the select board. The other question I have for this board is, I had presented packets to you in the reports. The 3 levels of appropriation is based on, how much they provide to the Putney community. And these, according to SWIFT, probably 3 would be in tier 3 and 1 possibly in tier 2. I don't know how we want to come up with, how do you want to do this? Is my question.
How all 3 of them have now, or all 4 of them have now submitted. I know I read through this and just because I'm scrolling. All 4 of them have submitted the necessary information to be included in the social agency.
Yep, so they filled out the questionnaire and it tells you approximately how many, Putney residents they serve, tells you their budget, and if they're supported by any other agencies. 2 of these agencies I noticed, and I don't know, I probably should have invited Swift, but I'm not quite sure she could answer the question. But 2 of these agencies, I don't know if they're like sub agencies to the retreat farm, but 2 of them they're associated with the retreat farm in Brattleboro.
And we don't currently give a social service contribution to the retreat farm. Is that correct? Or we do?
We do not.
Okay, so we should clarify that probably. Because if they are, yeah, because you're right. I mean, it says right on it, fiscal sponsor retreat farm.
Right.
I mean, my inclination would be, I think until we see a longer track record, I would say that I would entertain the idea of including these all as Section C groups. And then, once we have a relationship with them and have perhaps clearer data on the numbers, then maybe they get moved to a category B. But I don't know whether that sounds right to everybody or not.
Well, I was looking at, I don't think I have all of the questionnaires here, but the Atawi project, it looks like this one's brand new. And I, reading through their blurb, I think they might do great work, but I'm not sure they're, like, to your point, we don't have a relationship with them, and I'm not sure, how effective they're gonna be. I mean, maybe they'll be great, but I mean, speaking of a track record, they don't seem to have one at all yet. So I don't know what we've done in the past for organizations, whether they have to be in business for a while or.
So Jamie has her hand up, but I just wanted to make a comment. I have noticed with some municipalities, they will put social agencies requests for appropriations on the warning and have voters vote them in or out.
Each one separately?
Each one separately. And I have seen towns put all of their social agencies in a town warning to vote on them every year. So that's another option, but do you want to hear from Jamie?
Can I ask a question first?
Whoops, okay.
Right now at level 3, how many people, how many organizations are in level
We have
3?
1, 2, 3, 4, 6. We have 8.
Okay, so this would make it 12 if we decided to do that.
Right, and then
What's the appropriation then for level 3 divided by
based on the number that I have right now, which can change if I change the general fund, it's $900 a piece, but if I add 4 more, it'll be, less than that. So
it's divided among the groups.
It's the same total amount divided by the
Exactly.
Right, okay.
by
So-
12.
So it doesn't change the total amount we're contributing because that's based on the 2.5%.
Right, so it's a little under $600. apiece.
Got it. Thank you, Karen.
Jamie?
Jamie?
I invited Swift to the meeting because I thought Swift could speak to it, but I also served on the equity committee when we discussed this, I think early on in 2020, about these 3 or 4 recommendations. So I'm also happy to answer any questions. And I heard some of them about their histories and the reasoning that they would end up on this recommendation. This was a discussion that was had, I believe, by a 9-person equity and inclusion committee, and recommendations that were made to the select board. So, and it was over multiple years that this was discussed, and these organizations all have a very clear track record and constituencies that are represented from members in Putney. So I'm really happy to speak to any of that if Swift can be brought up to speed and answer questions, or I am happy to be on deck.
Do you know, Jamie, if what the nature of the relationship between the Brattleboro Retreat and these organizations is? I'm just that, but 2 of them both clearly say with sponsorship from the Brattleboro Retreat. I'm not sure what that relationship is. Do you know or not?
Yeah, as somebody who has helped form a nonprofit, that the retreat farm acts as the fiscal agent of the organizations. And so a number of them I've personally funded myself, and you make the check to the retreat farm with a comment in the section. It's for that specific work. And that is where the funding goes. It is to the organization. And many organizations do that. A number of the organizations are several years old. And in that beginning phase, many organizations do that.
Thank you.
And just to be clear, I'm not outside the Susu Community Farm, which I think was on the recommendation list. I didn't hear the other organizational names.
Atawi, the Root Social Justice.
Out in the open.
And out in the open. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. And the one that I was talking about is Italy, and they say in their application that they would be the first town because they are a new organization.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where my questioning came from.
I'm guessing we could have somebody able to speak to that at next week's select board meeting if Swift doesn't have an answer tonight.
What was the specific question? I'm sorry, I meant to come and got a nudge from Jamie and glad to be here.
Just the question is, the Atawi project appears to be a young and still sort of forming organization, and Putney would be, as they say on their form, Putney would be the first town to support them. Just do they have the track record for us to be reasonably confident that they are going to provide the service that they're wanting to provide, and that our money would help do that?
Yeah, so my understanding of Italy, and some of this is assumptions, and I think it'd be better to someone from the organization speaking to it. Maybe Karen or I can send an email to them with this sort of specific question. But Retreat Farm has been doing a lot of work in the Indigenous community with people from the, wow, I'm sorry, I'm just jumping in here, but the name of the tribe of that area is, I'm totally blanking. I didn't hear the end because I know the Atu and then
Abenaki.
Abenaki. Wow, that's yes. I can't. So it's a Atu at Abenaki. Retreat Farm is doing a lot of work with this tribe, with elders and with the community. They do events, and I think Atawi has been the formalization of that work. A piece of, like, we've been doing this for a long time, maybe 5+ years, maybe more than that, but I definitely know the past 5 years. And it's a piece of, like, how do we formalize this and make this into something that's more committed? But they have definitely been, the Retreat Farm is doing this work and also putting it in the leadership of people from Indigenous backgrounds, not just the Retreat Farm hosting this thing. Atawi is is run by a Native leadership. So I think they do have the history. I think it may not, yes, it's a new formal organization under this name, but they've been doing the work and now it's more formalized. And I think it would be amazing for us to back them in taking these steps as they are starting this year and having some financial, even however minimal it might be, having that financial dependency that they can have $500 to $800 from us every year to know that like they can do what they can depend on that as they're growing.
I would like to speak to this organization. I think they've done great work in educating. And if you read the Reformer, you can see they've been out there educating us about the history of the indigenous people in this area. And I think it's a wonderful organization.
So I'm not adverse to including all of these organizations. I mean, I think that it's not practical at this point to ask any of them to petition. And I'm not sure, given the Secretary of State's most recent, well, I guess that's just candidacies, not petitions for this type of thing. But I'm not adverse to including all four of them in as Category C organizations. And then over time, we evaluate as appropriate.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm good with that.
I'm fine with that too.
Okay.
So can we have a motion to that effect?
Okay, can I just do it as a slate?
Sure.
I have them all in front of me. I make a motion to include the slate of 4 upon the recommendation of the Equity and Inclusion Advisory Committee to option C.
That's the list if you
Oh.
wanted it.
It's too late.
Okay.
Is it option C or category C?
Category C, yeah.
The social services. That was badly worded.
And I'll second that.
And you'll second. Okay, so it has been moved to include the 4 organizations recommended by the Equity and Inclusion Committee to be included in Category C of the Social Service Agency budget. Is there any further discussion?
No.
I have a question.
Sure. Go ahead, Jamie.
Can you outline the categories again? I wasn't familiar with category C and what the monetary contribution is.
So groups.
Can I speak to it for a second? Sorry, because I'm curious. I think the monetary might change, right? Is that true?
Yes.
That's unknown right now, but category C is people that are not, the organization that is not serving anyone that actually lives in Putney. And category B, there are people that live in Putney, and category A is a Putney organization. My question is in their surveys, I know Susu definitely does service some Putney residents. They did service Putney residents in when they were giving out meals this summer. Were they really all category C? Was there none of them land in category B? I mean, out in the open, it is one of the only organizations locally that is a primary like LGBTQ community. I don't know, but I'm assuming there are LGBTQ people that live in Putney that are serviced by out in the open. I just don't know how they reference that in their surveys. I didn't see them.
So I can answer those questions. I have it in front of me. So
Thanks.
total number of clients they served this past year was 1,000. Number of clients who are in Putney residents, 150. Total budget of the agency last year was $266,782. And a portion of the budget used to serve Putney residents, 25%.
Right, so that's pretty high.
Yeah, and they don't get any financial support from other agencies.
The other question I had, I guess, Karen, can you speak to the other organizations? Are there any other ones that could possibly be in B? I know Susu might be in B, but are there other ones that might move to B?
Let me see. So the Root Social Justice Center served 200, at least 200 from Putney out of 1,500.
Right, that's
You know, their total income budget was 365,116. The portion of their budget was about 15,000 to Putney residents. And they are funded by the town of Brattleboro with an amount of $15,000.
So Karen, can you, I don't have it in front of me and I don't have enough screen space to bring it up. The criteria for being listed in B or C, I know that A is organizations that are in Putney. Criteria for B and or C.
So B is social service agencies based outside of Putney, which are providing a significant level of social services to Putney residents. Group C, all other social service agencies. So I guess we have to define significant.
Significant, yeah.
Yeah. So a question that comes to mind for me is if we don't look at the total list of agencies that we're providing for, how do we determine where a new agency might fall in that list? Because as we increase the numbers in any category, we're going to decrease the funding to the other.
That is correct.
So without being able to look at the big picture that way, how do we make a judgment? So
may I name the ones in Group B currently? And that may give you a sense. SEVCA, Visiting Nurse Alliance of Vermont, New Hampshire, Youth Services, Council on Aging for Southern Vermont, Healthcare and Rehab Services. So that's category B.
that's 5. Is that right? Did I count that?
Yep.
Wasn't
And-
counting, so.
And currently, I know Karen and I have had some
And
email
so-
exchanges about this, and it seems like it's going to change, but right now that's equal amongst C, equally divided amongst C, equally divided amongst B, and A is different. But in B and C, it's equal portions.
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, David.
So the contribution for an organization in B is what right now? The total, so that we could then see what the change would be by adding one, if we added this to section B, like we did the other one.
You want to add 1 or 2?
Well, we were talking about 1 at this
Right.
point, but
So
we could do the math either way.
divided by 6. So it's like $3,342.
As opposed to what, 5,000-ish?
Right now it's 4,011.
Okay, so the current organizations would each be dropped by, what is that? $800
Something like.
each,
Yeah.
right?
700, maybe 711.
And that's to add 1 or 2.
That's
That's
to add
adding.
1.
That's adding 1.
I know that we had talked about a committee forming to evaluate this policy. Is that still going forward to reevaluate the piece of like, oh, these are all equal? Or do we go by the amount of go by their surveys of like, oh, that the SUSU looking at their budget might get less than the root, but the root also gets this 15,000 from Brattleboro. So maybe they get a lower portion from us. Like, is there, I know it's right now.
That
it's
was
equal,
that
but-
was a charge for the Equity and Inclusion Committee.
So for us to evaluate, and come up with a different way of, okay, I thought there was a specific committee that was being formed specifically for the giving
No.
policy.
No.
Okay.
So fair and
We'll add it to the list.
fair and equitable. That's what we're looking for. And this is part of that conversation. So
I would, in the absence of knowing fully, and I've been obviously reviewing this budget for a long time, so I should know this, but I think that historically, when new organizations are coming in, we have asked them what category they believe they should be in and to explain that for us, kind of thing. I don't know that that's the case, but that's my recollection. Clearly, just based on the names that Karen read, those are large organizations comparatively. And I guess my inclination again would be to include all of these organizations in category C. And my feeling about that would be, let's develop a relationship with them by contributing to them, and then see how it grows from there. And if they end up in category B or ultimately category A, if they want to be in Putney, great. But let's give them some money to start with and see. I don't know. I'm not sure how we approach this.
I think that's a great idea.
I think that, go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead. Heather.
So I mean, I'm new at this, and so I've not known how the process has gone in the past for adding a new organization. I'm inclined to agree with Josh. I just want to make sure that we're being equitable and fair to prior organizations that were added to this list for the first time. I don't know if anybody has the institutional knowledge to answer that question.
I mean, the last one that really changed, well, we had the change in Putney of going from Putney Cares and Putney Services. So, but that's a whole different category.
Yeah.
Or the other one that shifted differently was when Morningside, and this is testing my memory on this, but Morningside merged and became, there was Morningside, the Gathering Place, and something.
And Groundworks.
And became Groundworks.
Right.
And that shifted things around. But, I think again, I'm doing this without the documentation in front of me, but when you look at the scale of the organizations that are in category B, those are large organizations with large budgets, which we're giving pretty good money to. And I don't, again, I'm not arguing. I don't want to not give these folks money. I want to give them money, but I think until well, I don't know. I mean, I guess that is a question for equity and inclusion, where these groups belong. But I'm not sure that jumping them right into Group B without having a relationship with them sounds appropriate to me, but maybe I'm wrong.
I would definitely lean towards having Susu in category B, considering the way that they filled out their survey, that 25% of their budget is going to Putney residents. That does seem like significant in my perspective. And I totally hear your piece of creating a relationship with them. And they have been a fixture in the community, a very successful fixture that is growing immensely in the past 2 years, especially in the pandemic. And also putting this piece of these other organizations have larger budgets. I don't know. I mean, I see that like, oh, we should match the percentage of their budget with our donation. I don't know if that is actually I don't like the first part of my lens. That's just like, that gets foggy, because I know that $3,000 could serve Susu so much more than it could serve one of these organizations that has such a large budget. $3,000 is not as significant as Susu. Getting a $3,000 organization donation from us is like, that's a big chunk of change for them that they can really do something with as they're growing. So I would definitely lean towards putting Susu in B, and maybe we do the other three as a slate in C, and then invite them to come to the next meeting and speak a little bit to the details of how they serve Putney residents.
I'd like to make a comment, and that is that I've only done this twice before, but the times that we did it before, when we were able to have them come and visit, the feeling that I got from it was that we partially chose what category they were in, depending on the amount of good they did for people in the community, not necessarily what percentage of their budget that we represented. So looking at this seems like it's a bigger thing. It's going to take longer to look at, to really suss that out. And I think I would lean toward what Josh is saying, to start them at C, develop a relationship, and then go from there.
And I don't disagree with you, Swift, that a $3,000 impact would be much greater on a smaller organization. But, just speculating about the monetary value of service we get from larger organizations such as HCRS, you know, when you start to look at the economics of it, I'm not sure that's the intent of our social service agency policy, is to significantly underwrite smaller organizations. It feels to me like all of those in category B are large organizations that presumably, even if we're, you know, only X% of their service that they provide, it's probably still pretty large monetarily. So I don't know. That's a tricky, I don't know what the right answer is here.
I mean, I would say I know a lot of individuals that received meals from Susu Farm this summer. I don't know anyone that received support from SEVCA, or I don't know people that have individual stories about those organizations. I'm sure they exist, but like all I feel like I heard about this summer was the success and the build and the growth that Susu Farm was doing and the way they were impacting our county. I think Ava and Jamie both have their hands up.
Karen, you said that some towns actually put it to the voters to decide.
Yes.
And I'm just about ready to say that we do it one time. Otherwise, I'd say, let's put them in C and see what happens.
Yeah, I feel like if you did do that, though, that I don't even know how you would draft a warrant article like that, because we would, especially if we're thinking of going for Australian ballot only, there'd be too many numerous ways that people could put, you know, one organization in B and one organization in A, and I think that could become a nightmare. So I think I would move away from getting it on the article and letting the voters decide.
Yeah, other towns do it and they don't do A, B, and C. They do
Okay,
it.
well, that makes more sense.
Well, it would probably, if we were to write it as an article like that, it would probably be noted as an monetary.
Exactly. Exactly.
But then the complicated thing about doing that is then, as we've already talked about, you know, if you're fitting it into a category, and this is just the nuance of the way the policy is designed, but you know, you have to consider the fact that you are then taking funding from other organizations by doing that. So it's tricky. And I again, I'm not sort of arguing for any specific thing, but it's hard to evaluate this without, I don't know.
Well, I'm hearing Swift about, you know, possibly putting Susu in B, but I do still feel like these organizations are, if not relatively new to the town, at least relatively new to town funding. And so I would be inclined still to put them in level C and see, and again, reevaluate it next year. And part of that is that I know that we're running out of time to evaluate these really properly. And I'd rather get them in with some funding than potentially not get them in at all.
I would like to speak when there's an opportunity.
Go ahead, Jamie.
I wanted to recommend that based on the conversations we had even 2 years ago around this in the equity committee, that we had a sense that this was the relationship we wanted to figure out with the select board, that this was the presentations that David talked about and the relationship building that happens with presentations is really important part of the process, and that equity, I think the committee had the expectation that we were doing it in relationship with a conversation with the select board, and that we didn't have the information we needed other than to recommend organizations that were going to be added into the funding. So I would make a recommendation that they start in section C, but that there is a relationship built with these organizations, that they are invited to come and present to the select board, because we are hearing from friends all over the country that Susu Community Farm is becoming a gem nationally and statewide. and that people are starting to recognize transformative work that's happening within our county. And there are other organizations that fall into that category, both with statewide leadership that many of us benefit from. And so creating those conversations and educational opportunities and a process by which to do that moving forward in the next couple of months is really important.
So we have a motion and it's been seconded.
Yeah, we do. I just want to reiterate that if the Equity and Inclusion Committee can also look at that policy, you know, if we're changing the policy in general next year, this next year could be that a relationship building piece that you're talking about.
Yeah, well, definitely. I think with the lens that equity inclusion is putting on networking, I think that that's an important piece to weave in. And I am happy to stand aside so we can get these organizations started on their journey of being having some support from Putney.
Supported by, yeah, no, and I have to say, Swift, I think it's great that we're including these 4 organizations, and it even if it's only in category C, it is the sort of a relationship that build and can, you know, as we learn more and become more better versed in what they're doing and how they're doing it, we can support them appropriately. So, but thank you to the Equity and Inclusion Committee for bringing this list.
And John Johnson.
John. All right, so it has been moved and seconded to include the 4 organizations that have been recommended by the Equity and Inclusion Committee for inclusion in our social service agency budget to be approved. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. All right.
I have one thing I want to ask about it with adding 4 organizations to C. When or is there discussion on increasing this budget? Would be curious if increasing the budget to C, something like increase it by $1,000 or $1,500.
Hey, David.
Sorry.
That's
Yeah.
Is there any when or if or how would this budget get increased, even if it's just minimally to section C to add that 4 organizations? Because right now I think they sit all about at $800, and adding 4 is going to significantly decrease all those organizations, and it wouldn't take much money to increase to, I mean, $1,600 added to that budget, and then it doesn't affect the other organizations.
Well, it's based on a formula, and
sorry, not 16, sorry, 32,
yeah,
whatever. 18.
Anyway, yeah, no, but it's based on a formula that's based on a percentage of the grand list and then based on percentages of that percentage. So it would be a question of whether, and that to the best of my knowledge, that's just the way it's always worked. It was tweaked at some point. I can't remember exactly when. Previous, I think, to my time on the board, but I think that would be the value of having Equity and Inclusion review it, is to say, are we supporting the organizations that we would like to in the percentages and therefore the monetary volume that we would like to. So, but in that case, there were 8 organizations that are each getting 900. So if you add 4 to it, presumably each organization would get about 600. So, you know, that's still a pretty good chunk of money. But that would be why we would look at it, is to say, you know, the other way you could think about it from that perspective is you could base the percentages given to each category on the number of organizations that are in each category, because those do change. So that would be one way of adjusting that formula for how much goes to each group. But in one way or the other, it's all based on a percentage of the income. So therefore, anywhere you add somebody, it's taking from somewhere else. So where you want to add to and take from is the debate. So
I have a question. I have a comment. Josh, please.
Go ahead, Karen.
I want to correct you because you stated that the formula is based on the grand list.
I misspoke.
Yeah. So the formula, the 2.5% is based on the general fund and the highway budget combined, less
Right.
the capital expenses. So it's based on budgets minus capital expenses.
What I was thinking, Karen, and I think I'm right in saying, what I meant by grand list is that it's based on the amount of taxable income that we receive from the grand list. So basically it's the total, yeah. Sorry.
Question statement, that 2.5% was decided by the voters.
Yes,
That was an article once, wasn't it?
yes.
Yes, okay. So
When,
So that total amount that you're gonna share up, whatever way you want to share it up, that stays the same. If you want to increase funding, then that's something that has to be brought back to the voters, right?
Yes.
Right, okay.
when would, if there's any chance of evaluating this and making changes this year, you need that in the like next week and a recommendation from us, right? Or when would you, is
Now,
that,
it's not possible. It's a little.
No.
okay,
We're
next year?
trying-
Great, just checking.
Yeah, I
No,
mean,
a
equity
good
inclusion. I mean, Jamie was on the original committee when all of this was handed to the committee. So, you know, having a week to get another article to change something, not happening, sorry. Nice
No,
try, Swept.
I think a year, you know, to really do it thoroughly and evaluate it properly, it's
Yeah,
gonna.
I don't
About-
want to rush it. I certainly don't want to rush it. I was just curious if it's like, oh, you have a month and a half, and it's like, oh, well, maybe that's something, but like, no, it's got to be done before town meeting or even a week before town meeting and town meeting. Anyways, thank you. Next year.
Go. Okay, so next,
We're not done yet?
we're on to other business. Is there any
No.
other?
No.
Draft budgets.
The budget.
Oh, Karen, you,
Oh, Josh, you can't see anything. I know, it's 8:30 already.
I know. So draft budgets, what do you need to do? Make it quick.
Well, I'm not expecting you to approve them tonight,
Right.
but you have them, you can review them. Do you want me to just give you kind of a snapshot?
Well, I'd like to know if you made a change between draft 4 and draft A, 4A. I'm assuming you did.
Yeah, I did. So let me just give you an overview here. So between the general fund and the highway fund, the budgets are up $1,468. So
That's the total of the two?
that's the total increase of both of them right now, okay? I'm satisfied and comfortable with the highway budget. And I'll let you know, that one increased $173,358. Most of the increase is in salaries for general maintenance and winter maintenance. And the $145,000 that was added to fund the capital reserve fund.
Karen, I haven't had a chance to look at this yet, but we had.
Not allowed to ask any questions then.
So one of the things that came up again when Samantha was here for the audit was we haven't really moved forward with allotting any money towards unrestricted reserve fund for the general fund. And I'm wondering if that's something that we ought to be talking about this year, or is it too late for that?
No, it's not too late, but that's surplus money, according to legal counsel, is up to the voters on how to spend it, okay? So what has to happen is an article gets written, it goes on the warning, and the voters decide whether or not we want to use money, surplus money, for certain things. And it can go into a reserve fund, David, like a capital reserve fund, you know, for, you know, improvements. You know, the highway department has a capital reserve fund set up for equipment and roads and bridges. And so we're kind of shuffling money. So surplus that's like not assigned can be moved by the voters. So
But we have no line item for that yet. We're not actually moving forward and planning towards having a reserve fund that would create that 300 to 400,000 we could operate from for 90 days. Yeah. We did that in the highway department, but we haven't yet in the general fund, correct?
right, so we have some unassigned surplus.
Yep.
Larry also instructed me that when there's a surplus, we should be designating it into a certain fund, or we should be giving it back to the taxpayers. So by reducing the overall money to be raised by taxation,
Right.
and we have done that a couple times since I've been here.
Mhm.
We've done it in the general fund once, and we've done it in the highway department budget. So I'm looking at those numbers, and I may add another article,
Okay.
because what we don't want to do, $300,000 to me is a lot of money.
Mhm.
That's 11 cents
Oh, it's huge.
increase, okay?
Right. We had talked about building it over time.
We're gonna have to build it over time. There's no way.
But we can also, I mean, we have some surplus, the article that I might recommend adding, we do have some surplus in the general fund.
Yeah.
Let's start a capital reserve fund with $5,000 of surplus. And then,
Go ahead, Josh. Sorry.
and then
it's-
we've
that's it.
got that capital reserve fund established so that we can continue adding to it in the future, because that's what we did with the highway department.
Exactly, right.
So it's not so much a capital reserve fund, right? It would be more of some kind of contingency fund.
One of the things that I remember from the information we got from the survey that we did, and when we were looking at the fiscal well-being of the town, was that the towns that scored the highest were the ones that had the largest amount of unrestricted reserve fund money versus the lowest amount of long-term debt. So I know it's very general, and I don't understand what language we need around it.
Right.
But we're working in that direction, is what I thought. So,
Josh, we do have a capital reserve fund.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I misspoke. But
No, it's okay. It's okay, because we have a lot of reserve funds, and let me tell you, I'm
Right.
like, my head is going a little crazy, but we already have one in the capital, in the general fund, excuse me. So, again, I'm gonna look at it before next week, because I may add an article. And David, moving surplus or reducing what needs to be raised by taxation is better than saying, let's take $100,000 and raise it, but that increases taxes.
I understand, and believe me, I'm the
Yeah.
last person that
Yeah.
wants to increase taxes.
Right,
But this is something we need to look at, and it needs to be some kind of plan,
right.
just like we're planning for the highway department.
Yes, I
So that-
agree with you. I
so-
totally agree with you. Laura Chapman has her hand up.
Laura.
Hi. So
Hi.
I'm sorry I can't be with you on screen, but I'm a little bit late to the party. I understand that tonight the 5-person select board petition was on the agenda. And unfortunately, I didn't know about that. And I was, in fact, the person that handed it in to John Johnson on December 13th. We had an entire conversation about it. I handed it in a month early because if there were any issues, I was hoping that we would be able to resolve them long before we got here. So I guess I'm hoping that next week during your meeting, there can be a little bit of time for us to discuss this.
Can I make a suggestion, Laura? This is Karen.
Sure.
So the meeting is being recorded.
Uh-huh.
So if you want to review that section where we talked about it, and then we'll have you come back next week.
Sure.
And
Yeah, I'm a
yeah.
little frustrated because my understanding is every other petition had their organizers reached out to except for us. And I'm really hoping that that was a misunderstanding, miscommunication. I don't know what, but it doesn't feel great right now. So I will do that and I will come back next week. And I thank you for your time.
I think that what happened on our end, Laura, was that there was a miscommunication, and this only came to light. It was a pretty straightforward article, and I don't think there was I wouldn't have thought there was a need to discuss it based on the article. But what complicates it is just the reality that if it in fact passes, then there are other things that have to happen. And those, it appears, would be select board responsibility to make those happen as probably additional articles. So I don't think it was less about, and then Larry, as you may or may not have heard, weighed in and changed some language in the article to try and adapt to that situation, but that just continued. So I don't think that, I think that we have homework to do, the select board has homework to do to make sure that if this clear article that was petitioned and presented to us passes, what we have to do as a result. So I don't think there was confusion about the petition or the article itself. It was about what the outcome, what the responsibilities are depending on the outcome. So.
Okay, I can appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So back to budgets.
Yeah, so we were talking about surplus and possibly creating I guess it would be called an unrestricted reserve fund, which sounds like a contradiction in terms, but the purpose of that fund would be as a contingency fund for everyday maintenance, so payrolls, bills, and the such like, as opposed to a capital reserve fund, which is reserved, I assume, for special projects, right?
Right. So we can create any name, like Westminster has emergency reserve fund.
Mhm.
Okay. That could be, it could be an emergency operating reserve fund. It can be, just about.
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily, so capital improvements, obviously town hall, library, whatever. So
Right.
whatever we name it, but we need to reserve that money
Right.
where we can access it in case of emergency or for a specific purpose.
Yeah, I'm just as we've gone through other funds and discovered, that things might not have been entirely clear.
Right.
That we need to make sure that we create the fund and word it in such a way that we, can then use the money in the way that we're intending.
Right.
You're here. Well done. Well said, Eileen.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman,
Oops.
Yes, Mr. Fairman.
2 questions for the town manager. I'll ask them separately. The first is, what is the current total of total amount of our money in our reserve funds?
Like all of the funds together?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't have that number in front of me, Howard. I'll have to get it for the next meeting.
Okay. So my second question is, what is the total amount of the surpluses of our money? I'm assuming you'd like to get that one for our next meeting as well.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, we just barely had the draft approved of the audit. So although I've been through it and but I can get that number for you, and this audit will be available to the public. It'll go on our website as well.
Well, and in fact, the draft was already presented to it, so Mr. Fairman could have access to it if he wanted.
Yeah, I just got the finalized one.
All right.
So can I just speak about the general fund? Because Eileen had asked about it.
Yes.
So in here, Eileen, I added a line item. And this budget too, by the way, is increased by $128,118. I've added a line item in here, contracted grant manager at $31,200. This was a
Where-
conversation.
Sorry.
We're on page 4. Page 4,
Okay.
like halfway down the page.
Contracted service. Oh, I see it. Yep.
Yep.
Okay.
So I put that in there as a holding spot, and I'm thinking like 10 hours a week. I did reach out to a couple towns and some people that I know write grants. And Brattleboro, for instance, their department heads write their grants and manage them. But they had a part-time person there, $20 an hour. But grant managers are going from like anywhere between $35 to $50 an hour.
Wow.
My thought process is to possibly subcontract with somebody for 2 years
Mhm.
while the ARPA money is available and stimulus money. And also look at other grants for like the Energy Committee and any, we need to be tapping into this money. And I don't have the bandwidth or the staff here to do that.
Right.
So whether or not, we pay somebody, this amount or less hours, I did put it in the budget because I think it's very important right now that we try to capitalize on whatever we can.
Yeah.
And Karen and I had the conversation, and I think that, it sounds like a chunk of money going out, but that money well spent on a person who knows how to garner funds and manage them appropriately would pay back many times over. So that would be the hope anyway.
And I don't know if we want to go down this road, but my understanding is that we could use ARPA money to fund that position.
That was my next question.
No, I think we might be able to,
I think we
because I was
can.
thinking economic development consultant too, but it's, I don't know. I think we have an opportunity here and, whether or not we have to pay for it somehow, but if we can get grant money for it, then so be it.
Mhm.
But as an employee, I didn't put this person in as an employee because then we would have had benefits,
Right.
Right.
liability, and, contracting with somebody, with an agreement, then we have an expectation.
Yeah.
I think we're all on board with that. Huh?
Yeah, and I think, the $40 to $50 an hour seems like a lot, but if we're not paying benefits, it's actually probably a lot cheaper
Right.
that way.
Yep. So, everything else is salaries, benefits increased a little bit. The sheriff's contract is up $15,000. But this is, it is what it is. And I've been lean for the last 4 years and I can't do it anymore.
So Karen, last year we were up 2 cents. Is that what you said? And what was it you said earlier? You gave total numbers, but I didn't.
11 cents.
Okay.
Which, when you look at that from the amount of an increase that is, if you're not looking at the school budget, that, what was our total last year? 63, Karen, somewhere in that range? So an 11 cent in 11.
Right. Yep.
11-cent increase would represent, a 15-18% increase, something like that. So in the municipal portion of the budget, it's not insignificant.
Oh, that's huge. Yeah.
No.
Karen, there's a note under the Energy Conservation Committee. You and I had a conversation about this, where the fund was originally set up for town buildings and vehicles only.
Yes.
And because that was a warrant, I just, did you get a chance to run that by council?
I haven't yet, and I have the 4,000 still in the budget.
Yeah,
And that was a question too, whether we could increase that number or not. So I will,
yeah, because if that fund is restricted that way, that really hobbles what the energy committee was planning on doing with that money.
yep,
So if we could get that resolved, that'd be great. In one way or the other.
I'll look into that tomorrow. Gonna have it finalized by next Wednesday.
Okay.
The library operating budget, as you all know, the town appropriation will be 190,810 to support their operating budget. I'm comfortable with their budget. The sewer department and the water department, I did a quick analysis, and the user fees are not covering the operating expenses at this point. So I'm in discussions with Chris Hayes again. We've been talking about looking at rates, structuring them so it's fair and equitable for the village and anybody on water or sewer and or. And I can let you know, last year, I think it was it sewer? No. So the water last year, we had a deficit of $11,452. And I suspect we'll have a deficit again this year. Sewer was positive by $9,500. It'll be tight. I'll let you know that the budget for the sewer right now is $302,831, and we're only billing currently $268,232. The water is in the same situation. Their operating budget, $151,303. And we're currently billing $129,712. So I need to look into this deep, and hopefully by July 1st, we'll have a solution. But I'm not too terribly worried about it. I think we might be able to recover. But if we keep showing a deficit, we're going to be losing in both those budgets and surplus monies that might be sitting in there.
So Karen, with the possible inclusion of the, what is it, 25 unit housing development coming online, does that help that situation?
It won't.
Okay.
The rates are going to have to change to cover the expenses. There's, we're always, the increases are in like the chemicals and the testing, everything just keeps going up. And, I've been seeing it in the last 2 years. And this year I really looked into it, and I'm like, yeah, we're not even covering our operating expenses. And, the thing too with water and sewer, it's always a rolling balance. So if there's $10,000 out there that hasn't been paid, it'll come into the next fiscal year maybe, but it doesn't help that year that, there's that deficit. So we're on top of it, but
I think I'm right in correcting you, Karen, to say that if a new affordable housing community came online, that would help that situation. It's not going to cure that situation. I mean, more users means more income, means better funded sewer and water. But if it's not sufficient to cover the costs of the expenses, then it's not going to
catch up.
It's not going to change. It's not going to change that equation. but it will increase the amount of money coming in. So,
That's what I was thinking, but I also realized there might be a diminishing return there because there's probably more an increase.
to a extent, yeah.
Yeah,
Yep, because we're adding to the system, you know?
right. Jamie has her hand up.
Yes.
Jamie, go ahead.
I had a question and I had to walk away for a minute, so maybe you answered this, but I was noticing the yellow tape on the stairs in front of Town Hall and wondered if that was included in this year's budget to repair those stairs or take them out, or what a process could be, or if volunteers could help, and if there isn't a budget for beautifying the front of Town Hall, if we could have a work day.
I have an
It's
answer.
it's been budgeted for a couple years now, or at least a year, and we have not, the contractor who was going to be taking care of it has not got it yet. So Karen, you want to elaborate?
I'll just clarify that Paul Bemis has been hired, and we have the material. The stones are down at the town garage. And when the weather permitting, he will come and he will fix those front stairs. They're not gonna look like that, Jamie. They're gonna look different, but hopefully, he said they're gonna last a lot longer and they won't crumble like we have out here. But it's in the works and I'm hoping by the spring. The stone, they couldn't get it. It took forever. The supply chain was just, you know, impacted by COVID. So that was the delay.
All right. So that might have fallen under the other business category. So maybe we're in the other business department. So are we ready for other business, Karen?
Sure.
Okay. Is there any other business?
Let's do it.
I thought we were done with
Jamie.
other business.
Yeah, no, well, Jamie just brought something up, so that's good, but is,
Nice segue.
all right. If not, do we need an executive session?
I do, for just, it'll be short, I promise.
And no decision will be made.
No.
Okay. All right, so we will, let's see, our next regular meeting date will be January 26th, so 1 week from tonight at 5:30. That will be a regular meeting. And we won't make a decision as a result of executive session. So we will inform people of our time of concluding that and time of adjournment. Do I hear a motion to enter executive session?
Make a motion to enter executive session under Title I V.S.A. 313A3.
And I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to enter executive session under Title I V.S.A. 313A3, and we will be inviting Karen Astley to join us. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, folks.